Um, Good to go.
Absolutely.
All right. Hello and welcome to episode 188 of the Gaming Fix podcast on this beautiful September Ford. Uh, it's the dream team you've always been waiting for. Finally, it's the two people you came to the podcast to hear without any interruptions in the way. Joining me this week is Alex.
Hello.
Hello. And it's me, Pat. We have
Hi,
our
Pat.
other lovely co-hosts uh, are out this week, but we're holding it down.
I don't know. I don't have any clever quips or whatever. I don't know. We're holding it down with our dump truck booties or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Yeah.
I almost was like, oh, if you don't have anything to say, I'll just keep talking. And then it was funnier for it to be quiet for a long time and I love doing that to people because anytime there's more than 2 seconds of silence in a podcast, I always go, oh shit, did it pause for some reason?
Oh no!
So
Did my internet die?
yeah,
Uh,
yes. Did my car break down? Um,
y-
so
did
I hope
did
that
a
everyone has had that
tree
experience.
tree fall on my car again?
If a tree falls on your car and there's no one there to see it, did it happen? Yeah, so it's just the two of us. You've been away for a little bit, Alex. Do
I
you
have.
have any fun to talk about your games or talk about whatever going on?
I'm trying to think of anything particularly hilarious happened. Not really, other than like going for a lot of runs and just running into an absurd amount of raccoons. Like,
Oh, that's good.
yeah, like it's fine, but raccoons are weird in that they will just kind of like deer in headlights in front of you when you're running. Like they'll just kind of stand there and
They don't
stare
really
at
care
you.
about people, in my
No,
experience.
not
Uh,
particularly, but like it's the kind of thing where they might be intimidated if you just stare at them and they're staring back at you and they just won't move. So like oftentimes if I run into that situation, I just have to turn around for like a second and then they'll run away and then I just keep going.
my favorite raccoon thing that ever happened, I saw a raccoon like a month ago just trotting down the road, which was good. Not in the road, thankfully, on the sidewalk. Uh, but the my favorite thing that ever happened with raccoons is when I was camping one time, just a few years ago. Not like in my youth. Um, there, I was sleeping, and then I got woken up by this like chittering noise, and I was like, oh, there's raccoons somewhere. And I got out of the tent and zipped it back up behind me because I was like, please don't go in my tent. Um, and some of the people I was camping with were not very experienced campers, uh, and did not understand that like the depths that raccoons will go to take your food and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I got out of the tent and there's this big tree over me and this bag of bread hits me like square on top of the head, which is fine because it's soft because it's bread. And then I looked up and turned my flashlight on, and there's a raccoon with two others around it holding a piece of bread, just like going to town on it, like halfway in its mouth, and it just freezes when I turned the flashlight on and pointed it up and just looks at me, and the other raccoons looked at me in the perfect like cartoon freeze frame of like uh
I love that.
and, and it was because someone had left food out on this loaf of bread out on the table without putting it away. And I was like, you know what? At this point, and I just kind of like took the bread out of the bag and left it there and threw the bag away so that they wouldn't choke on the plastic and went back to bed.
Yeah,
They
that's
were very
fantastic.
happy. I don't really
Do,
like feeding wildlife, but at that point it was like, well, I'm not going to eat the raccoon bread
yeah,
now.
you
It's it's
may as well
yours
not
now.
further inconvenience them. Yeah, that's
Yes,
hilarious.
it's very
Like,
good.
okay, when they went back for the bread, like obviously they're gonna go back for it now. Did
It was
they? Do
gone
you
in the morning for
know?
sure. So
Do you know if they did it in the tree or did they just grab all of it and book it?
I don't know. I didn't stay up long enough to watch them. I should have. I
Fair
will tell
enough.
you that someone got really irritated in the morning that the bread was gone. And I was like, well, it got left out. We learned something about camping. Raccoons got into it. And they were like, why didn't you chase them off and save the bread? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's like there's a grocery store 10 minutes away and you have a car. Just go buy some bread.
Oh, so this was like near city camping. This
Oh,
wasn't like.
this was like car camping.
Oh,
It
okay.
wasn't near a city, but there was definitely a place to get bread nearby.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know what it's how it is there, but like there's lots of camping. There's tons and tons and tons of camping in Michigan where it's like a state park and you could almost walk to like a convenience store or something. And it'll still
There's
be
some
like
spots,
in the
yeah.
woods and you're still camping, but it's car camping and you're not that far from like stores and stuff. So
Sure. We definitely have something like that. You get some deep woods camping and like
well,
that
yeah,
stuff
there's
is
that there
fun.
too.
Yeah.
In Washington, it's a little more common to have camping that's like more off the beaten path.
Sure.
I'm sure there are some places where you can go, but like the one time I went camping in Washington, we were a good 45 minutes from anything. But these people would not have been able to handle that. uh, that was that was a camping trip where I mostly just sat and read because no one wanted to do anything that I found particularly interesting.
That's unfortunate, but
It's fine. I
it's not
like
the
sitting at
worst.
campsites and reading, so
Yeah.
it was still a good trip for me.
Speaking of good
Anyway,
trips.
yeah, I've always wanted there to be a video game about. I mean, I know there are games that have camping in them, but I've always thought like one of my dream projects would be to work on a survival game where you're camping, um, and then it's like just build as a camping simulator, and then there's like really creepy horror shit just kind of snuck in there that you don't necessarily know about. I mean, it's some people would have take deep issue with surprising them with horror game stuff, but
Yeah.
uh, I've
Like
always kind of wanted to make a game like that.
yeah, that sounds good. Like you kind of get a little bit of that with Don't Starve, but
Hmm. I
but
think
it's different.
I have a free game in my library that I still haven't played called Hog Hunter 2021. I think that game does that because it kind of looks like a Dusk sort of game or something,
Hunter 2021.
where you hunt hogs, and I think maybe they start to turn into like horrifying monster hogs or something. Um,
Boss Hogs, if you will.
yeah, yeah, but I never got around to playing it. It was
Wow,
free and it
this
looks short, but
says very positive reviews.
yeah. I mean, it's
And
usually
like
free games get pretty good marks on Steam,
yeah.
but it's supposed to be cool. I'll get to it eventually. It's only like a couple hours, I think.
I know it's
Anyway,
like
video
Quake.
games. Yeah, totally.
The
Uh,
top review, someone who has about an hour on it. It's a thumbs up. It's got a whole bunch of awards. All it says is hog.
yes, very good. I want to see the person with the most playtime in Hog Hunter 2021.
Yeah.
um, so speaking of hog-like animals, uh,
Uh-huh.
you've been playing a game with some hogs in it.
I
Uh,
guess.
there's a hog Pokemon in Pokemon Unite, right? There's something in there.
Like there's a hog Pokemon. I don't know if there's a hog Pokemon in Pokemon Unite.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I don't even know. They've added. I haven't played that much the last couple of weeks, so they've added. I think just Blastoise is the only one that. Blastoise is a little bit hog-like. I know he's a turtle, but
Yeah, he's got that
uh,
sick ass
Snorlax is kind of a hog.
what's the name of the friggin' starter that was like am I thinking of like Tepig?
Yes, I think you are.
Maybe?
Wigglytuff has big hog energy.
Yeah, that's also relatively new. Or
Yeah,
no, sorry, not Blissey is relatively new.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyways, yeah, Pokemon Unite. So how in depth do we want to go? Because I have lots we could talk about.
I don't know that we need to go like all the way deep, but um, like more than I played it, I liked it or didn't like it. Maybe not like the hardcore numbers. I mean, obviously MOBAs you can talk about the hardcore numbers for hours if you want to.
Yeah, totally. Like we could. It's just us. We could go in depth about Dota items and builds and
Yeah.
balancing. No, but let's not. So,
Eventually, I think I'm going to talk about Destiny a little bit. So,
oh boy.
you
Okay,
know,
we'll have our numbers talk later then. Um, so yeah, with Pokemon Unite, I made it to Masters, which is currently the highest rank in the game,
it's like
and
Challenger kind of, I think,
I
in
don't know what
League.
Challenger is. Oh, okay,
It's just the
yeah,
league rank that's like the highest, where you start, your rank starts becoming like how high are you ranked amongst other players. It's no longer
yeah,
like your gold 3 or whatever. It's like your
yep,
Challenger 1231. That means you're the 1200th best player, 1231st
totally,
best player in the world.
yep, yep,
I
and
don't
it
know if that's exactly how
puts
Challenger works, but in spirit, it's basically that.
yeah. So yeah, in the game in Pokemon Unite, it does put you onto a global like ranking leaderboard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so like having made it to that level, I feel pretty like I feel like I have a pretty good feel for the game as a whole, and like we can probably talk about any aspect of it now. And if I was to give it a review, like if we are going to do a mini review here, I'm not going to write one on the site because I don't think we need to. I could if this conversation ends up being interesting and people want to see it in another form, but I pretty much have two completely separate opinions about the game. Like the first one is if you're playing it casually, like if you're just playing it with like lower stress game modes, playing it with friends, like you're not taking it too seriously, or you're someone who's just learning MOBAs, like anything like that. I think it's excellent. I think
Mm-hmm.
it lowers the barrier to entry for a MOBA to like a super manageable and like just gives you a super digestible experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does that in particular better than pretty much any other game. Like certainly better than Dota, better than League from when I tried it. Like
Yep,
Smite
I
is
would
like
say.
closer, but like yeah, I just think it holds your hand in good ways, and it simplifies the mechanics in really smart ways. Which like I don't know, I used to be a pretty hardcore Dota player. Like it was like 4500 MMR or something. I can't remember actually. Around 4500 MMR at the peak, so relatively competitive, and like definitely know like all of the intricacies and shit there of like oh like this item and this team comp and all this kind of stuff is what you want and blah 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 blah. Like it's really nice to play a much more simplified game
Yeah, yeah,
where it's there's still depth. Like there's definitely depth to Pokemon Unite, and uh, but it's just simplified in a lot of really smart ways. So I
yeah,
think
for sure.
that makes it like a really 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 easy recommendation for any new players. And like if you're looking at it from that perspective, 5 stars. It kicks ultra booty. Everybody
And
should play it.
I think that works well for people like me too, who I really like the genre quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'll hop into League and play an ARAM here and there. And I like even occasionally will reinstall Dota to play a game or two with somebody. I wasn't as hardcore any of those games as you were, but still like I played a lot of them for a while.
Yeah.
And now when I'm gonna just play me, I like Smite a lot, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about like sitting on the couch with a controller and playing a MOBA, and you can play Smite on console, but because I am used to playing it on PC, I can't stand it on console. Um, and it's definitely nice to have that sort of more simplified experience where I'm not worried about um, basically like I'm not really worried about my performance basically because it's
Totally.
very easy to just jump in and do my best. And yeah, I might screw up sometimes, but it's not like you can like flame each other really anyway. There's very minimal chat built into it and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been nice to have for that as well, from just even a perspective of someone who's not new but just wants to play something a little laid back. And I gotta say too, I'll just slide in here while I don't have a problem with like some like waifu stuff happening in games. It is kind of pleasant to just play a MOBA where it's not like half the skins in the game are clearly designed to make you horny. Uh,
Totally.
there's something about that I think
Yet.
is charming in that game. Oh God.
Slow
I
bro coming soon.
um so I it's a barely notable thing because like I
Yeah.
think especially in a game like Smite, and this is true of League too, like one, Dota doesn't do that as much as either of those games, and in Smite and League they're really great art around pretty much all the skins, even if some of them are a little on the horny side. So it's not like I have a moral problem with it or anything, but there is something about like Pokemon being cute and not either like brooding emo dudes or sexy ladies. That's kind of pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, the trope for a lot of MOBAs is welled within the fantasy genre. Like,
Yeah.
to like varying degrees, like Smite, I would still consider in the fantasy genre.
Oh, it's still fantasy. Yeah, I mean,
like,
it's mythology, but it's fantasy.
Yeah, like you get into like some Super Monday Night Combat stuff, which is maybe a little less fantasy, but just stuff that's within that genre typically falls into those kind of paradigms, which, you know, it just happens. It's something you just kind of have to accept at some point. But you're right, Pokemon lends itself to just being like, oh, we're just gonna do some funny, clever takes on these characters that you know and love.
Yeah.
So like that's all good. All right, so yeah, the first take was like the kind of casual players, new players, stuff like that. 5 stars, play it. The second take, because I have two opinions, is when it comes to being for competitive players. Like if you intend to climb the ranked ladder all the way up to master, or just wherever you want to set your own goals, like you want to get deep into the mechanics and things like optimal combinations and team and lane compositions and counter picks and, you know, the proper ways to stack abilities and things of that nature. Like, so I find the stacking ability stuff fun, 'cause, like maximizing your stun time, so you're not like hitting someone with 3 stuns, so they're only stunned for a second. Whereas if you stacked them, they might be stunned for like 5 seconds. You know, stuff like that.
Making someone want to uninstall the game, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think when you're coming at Pokemon Unite from that side, it's not as good. But
Sure.
But the thing is, the game itself actually holds up pretty well at the higher level. Like the mechanics remain pretty engaging.
Surprisingly well from what I've seen.
Yeah, like the speed of gameplay and like just the speed of ability execution gets way higher when you're at the higher levels. And when the matchmaking hits and you're like you can be having some really evenly matched and just exciting games. The kinds where if you lose them, it doesn't feel bad because you're like, okay, we were pretty evenly matched. Like we made some mistakes, you know, they had some couple really good plays. They won. They totally earned it. So like games like that, they're awesome. But the problems start to come from everything surrounding the actual playing of the game.
Yeah.
The first thing is actually one that you mentioned as kind of being a positive, and the built-in communication system is pretty bad for competitive play.
Absolutely.
There's a total lack of customizability, and there's no just generalized phrases.
Right.
So like, for those who haven't played it, in the game you basically get a chat wheel, and you get lots of super specific things like going to top lane, going to bottom, middle, attack, retreat, things like that. But there's no simple like yes or no or thank you or like my bad or anything like that. Yeah, like,
I don't even think there's just like a ping where you can ping yourself.
Okay. There is. You actually have to tap on the mini map.
Gotcha. Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do a little bit with that, but regardless, it ends up people end up kind of have to trying to make their intentions known, like as a yes or no by using those by using attack or retreat. But then you don't know if they actually mean retreat or if they actually mean no. Like if someone says I'm going top and then a second or two later someone else says retreat, like you don't know if that means they themselves are retreating or if they're saying no, don't go to top, it's a lost cause.
Yeah, exactly. And the other problem is with that system, and I mean I'm sure you can get better at it, but I found myself constantly going like having to look at the wheel too much to see what I'm saying, because there is no easy way. If you say the wrong thing in the wheel, there's no easy way to say like wait, I didn't mean that.
Oh, totally.
And so when you're in the heat of it, it's not great. And again, by contrast to something like Smite, and Hi-Rez does this across their games. I don't know if they have it in Rogue Company, but in Smite and Paladins anyway, they have it. They have a system that they call VGS, which you use just you hit the V key to initiate it, and then you press a key to go deeper into a voice command menu, and there's basically key combinations, and they let you get extremely specific. There's I think like 50 or so different things you can say, and you can very effectively play that game. In some cases, there are pro players that I've seen that are way faster at communicating with VGS than by talking. That's because awesome. They're able to just like rattle off the key combo in under a second. So you can
Totally.
just sort of roll it to say different things, and then the text chat pops up as a voice says the thing. So it's
Mhm.
actually like can be faster for players. Some players, it's pretty rare that there are players that are that good at it. But anyway, like I don't have the VGS system memorized very well, so I'm really bad at using it, but my partner knows it really well. So like she can fully communicate with people almost
Yeah,
as effectively as in voice with VGS.
that's
Um,
awesome.
whereas
Yeah,
like Pokemon, it's again, you could learn it, but it's pretty dicey to try to have serious communication with people.
yeah.
Uh,
Like you're right. Like I do have it more memorized now that I've like played a lot of it. Like I know towards the top left is how you say going top lane, but the problem is there's so many phrases in that wheel that like if you move your slick or your stick ever so slightly and miss, you're gonna potentially say the complete opposite of what you mean. Like, um, I'm going top is directly next to retreat, and like if your stick moves a little bit and you intend to say I'm going top, you might just say retreat, and it's just like no, that's not what I meant. So yeah, like it's that part of it is also kind of stinky. But yeah, like there's a lot of other things I could talk about the chat wheel, which is it's we're kind of getting into the deep number stuff, sorry. But like, if you could have a simple thing like missing top or be careful because you can't warn your teammates if they're going to get 5-man ganked. Like that's a big problem, especially
yeah,
at high level
and
play.
I think one could argue that like even given the what I said about high res games, and if you look at Dota or Smite, like
Or Counter-Strike.
any high level game like this,
Yeah.
you got to be on voice chat with your team if you're trying
Yeah.
to play at a high competitive level for sure. Um,
Probably, yeah.
so I don't know that it's a hugely like a huge knock against it, but at the same time, I think even there have been times when I've been playing with people who clearly don't know what they're doing, and I
Mm-hmm.
try to like communicate with them to tell them what to do in Pokemon, and it's really difficult because of how limited that communication thing is.
Well, let me tell you about my second point that makes the
Yeah,
high level matchmaking a little bit rough, and that's the actual matchmaking itself.
yeah,
Because, like I was saying, when it's good and those balanced games are fun and great, like it's awesome. You're gonna have a good time with them. Uh, but the problem with the matchmaking is that it's usually kind of inconsistent at best, and then other times it's just really bad. Like,
yeah.
even at like the ultra levels, and I'll get into the levels in a sec, but like I had lots of high level games with straight up just AFK players. Like, I don't know if it's bots, I don't know if it's just like some weird way to
Well,
grind points or whatever, but they're literally just AFK from minute
yeah,
zero.
yeah,
And like you start to run into lots of rounds with like griefers who would just intentionally feed or make sure the other team wins, which is just like, why do people do this? And like, yeah, anyways, like the one that ends up being really strange with the high level games in particular, like when you start getting to the top tiers, is you get this really weird mix of ranks. Where I was in like the veteran and ultra leagues, which are the two before masters, and I would sometimes get people from like beginner level ranks on my team, which it's like, hey, I'm not disparaging those players, but it's like
it's
everybody has to
weird.
learn. It's just weird because
Yeah,
they become like almost liabilities, and which
yeah,
is
yeah, for sure.
it's like if you're trying to have a competitive game with like other high ranked players, it's just weird. And like it's no knock against them, they just don't have the dexterity built up to
Yeah.
compete at those high levels. They might not understand the mechanics and stuff like that, which
Hmm.
you don't have really time to teach them.
No, well, and there's
Like
no way to teach them.
also that, but like it also ends up that once you're at those levels, like there's only so much you as an individual can do to carry a game. Like,
Right.
yes, you can do well and get lots of kills and assists and even score a lot of points, which is ultimately what wins the game. But for example, if the other team is good and they recognize the weakness in your team and they just start splitting up and then just scoring more goals individually
Yeah.
just on different places in the map and no one else on your team is trying to stop them, then you're just going to lose like because of
Well,
momentum.
and something that this is a minor complaint that I have about the game, the gameplay itself, or the structure of the game. And it's tough because I think comeback mechanics are good, so I don't know that it's a bad thing. But it is frustrating that you can dominate a match and a team can kind of come back and crush by getting some good late game plays.
Mhm.
And it's not that I don't think that comeback should be possible, but there is a sort of like, I have been in situations where I've been like, what, we like lost one fight and then we lost the game by 200 points, even though we were ahead. Like, what
Yep.
the fuck? And that is extremely frustrating when it happens. That's probably my biggest frustration with the game as a
Yeah.
game that can occur. And it's exacerbated when you have players who maybe you do. I have had games where I've carried and like managed to rotate enough to deal with like 1v2 people who are the players on their team who are recognizing where the weak spots are and
Mhm.
try to eke out a win. And then because at the very end, even though we were winning by 50 points or so or whatever, at the very end they get a good Zapdos and we're just like totally roasted. And it's really frustrating when that happens.
Totally. And at the higher levels, like Zapdos control ends up being a thing, and you'll actually find in a lot of like Ultra and Masters games that people don't even touch Zapdos. Like, and it's more about zoning people away from
For sure.
Zapdos. It's interesting.
It seems like it would be an interesting and good mechanic at high level play, and it's also a good mechanic at low level play to make comebacks feel possible, to keep you from giving up. But in that sort of mid range of play where you're not quite playing at a very high level, which is where I kind of have been, even though I haven't played a ton of it, you're not playing at a particularly high level, but you're also past the beginner stage. It can just feel kind of frustrating because it's like,
totally.
Oh, they're just going to Zapdos and win the game, even though we've dominated the whole match.
Which gets exacerbated by the poor communication.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, those two tie together, and I'll wrap it up with my biggest problem, and I think this is something they like. If you look at like Reddits and Twitters and stuff like that of the people who are playing at high levels, this is a system that everybody is universally saying they need to completely rework. And that is that the game actively punishes you for playing well. So this is talking about the player point system. And if you haven't played ranked, the way it works is, like I was saying before, there are different levels of ranks. So you start at beginner, then you level up to great, expert, veteran, ultra, and master. So like the lowest point of the totem pole is beginner, and then master is at the top, and you're just kind of raising through the levels as you go. So each rank itself has like a set of classes that you need to work through. And the way that works is like if you start at the very start, which is beginner 1, then every time you win, you get a little diamond. And there's 3 diamonds that you need to fill in. And once you do that, you move up a class. So like you start at beginner 1, you win those games, you get those diamonds. Then you go up to beginner 2, so on, beginner 3. And then once you win beginner 3, you get promoted to the next rank, which is great. So then you're doing great 1, great 2, great 3, great 4, and so on and so forth. But after that, you have to make it through 5 classes instead of 3 with the higher ones. So,
Right.
Veteran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will promote you up to ultra and stuff like that. So that's the very short version. And I think it's the system in and of itself is okay. Like, I don't think it's the best, but it's fine.
They use it in Hearthstone. That's where I've seen it. But I can remember most directly seeing it.
Yeah, I'll have more thoughts on that after. Like, I think it's fine for like this first season, but if they make master players go through the beginner to grind again, I think that's a failure.
They shouldn't. If they continue to do it like Hearthstone and Rocket League, I think does this too, similar system, then you start already at a certain rank. Yeah. And if you don't play for a full season, then you'll deteriorate back down. But like you'll start at like ultra or something next season. I don't think you have to grind back through beginner.
Yeah, like we'll see what ends up happening with this game. Like I would hope they do something like that, because I think it'll be a failure if they do make you do everything again without like even a calibration match. I
think like the hardest core of players will do it anyway. They'll complain while they do it, but they'll do it. And I think casual players don't give a shit. So I don't think it'll like kill the game, but it'll be a poor choice for sure.
But yeah, so back to ranked and the player point system. At first glance, it's kind of great. It's an awesome system. Like the way it works is after every round, you're awarded with a certain amount of these points, and they kind of persist between matches, basically at your account level, where it'll be like, oh, you won the game, here's 10 points. Oh, you got a high score, here's another 20 points. Oh, you're on a win streak, here's an extra 30 points. Like it's just giving you these points, and you're always accruing them. And if you get enough of them, it'll act as though you got a win. So you have those diamonds at each class, the 1, 2, 3, and then move up. It'll fill in one of those diamonds for you. It's like, hey, rad, free win, cool. But another thing that it does is that if you are losing a lot and you're about to rank down, as long as you have a certain amount of points and you're about to drop, like you're going to go from Ultra 3 to Ultra 2, then it will actually do what it calls like rank loss prevention, I think. And it will consume some of those player points to prevent that rank down, which I think it's a cool idea. I also think there's some flaws with that concept, but whatever. It's good enough to still be cool. The problem with the system is how it works at the higher levels, because at the lower levels you need about 100 points to get that like free win, and it's actually pretty generous about how it handles the rank down prevention. Like I think you need like 20 points or something at the lower levels to prevent the rank down, which is cool. It's like, oh, I was about to go down to Great 2, but I had that safety net. So once you're in Ultra, to get that extra diamond, you need 400 points, which is a lot. And each 100 point increment is a rank down prevention, which is cool. That's like basically 4 safety nets. However, it's cool until you realize you cannot opt out of consuming them. So if you reach 400, it is going to do that. And that can be like 20 games. Like it's a long time. And then
all your safety's gone.
Exactly. So you're always accruing these player points. So even if you lose games, like you're still getting 10, 20, whatever. And the only time you ever lose any player points is if rank down prevention happens. So for me, like I ran into a very particular situation, which I've seen others complain about before, where I was at Ultra 4, and to make it into Masters, you need to make it through Ultra 5. So I had 2 diamonds at Ultra 4 and nearly max player points. So I won that next game, which put me at 3 diamonds, and then the player points rolled over and pushed me into Ultra 5, which it's like, okay, that's cool, but I actually would have opted out of using those because it would have been really nice to make it to Ultra 5 and having 4 safety nets, because exactly what you thought would happen happened. When it consumed them, I lost those next 2 games, which meant it threw me straight back down to Ultra 4. And then I had no more safety net. And then I actually fell down to Ultra 3 because like I ran into like a string of games with a bunch of AFKs and griefers. And it's just like
the problem with systems like that is that it causes you to bounce back and forth between rankings so much. And that's bad for matchmaking, because then it doesn't have a very, like, you should have a pretty decent linear curve to hitting your rank that you are, basically at skill wise, and then it should level off and become more difficult for you to progress. But ostensibly, if you are sitting at that rank, this is a part of the problem with rank systems in general, is people look at it and go, well, I need to get to the top. The point is, no, you need to get to the point where you're going to have the highest quality matches. Exactly. And as your skill level increases, you should go up. But Pokemon's rank system is much more of, it's like Hearthstone in that they make it like a carrot on a stick, which is very frustrating. When the obviously I play a lot of iRacing, and in iRacing, they do a smart thing where you're gated. This wouldn't work for Pokemon, so I'm not saying they should do it, but it's interesting. You're gated as to what races you can participate in by your safety rating. And that has nothing to do with it has to do with your driver skill, but it has nothing to do with your MMR. MMR is a separate number. And the way that they avoid this problem is a thing that would seem very harsh. And I think the solution would be to keep the system the way it is for the first, through Great or something. By the time you're at Ultra, they should drop it, because what happens in iRacing is when you cross the safety rating is a whole number. Well, it's not a whole number. It's a decimal number. So it ranges anywhere from like 1 all the way up to 4. And
I see.
The way that you progress in license classes, if at the end of a 13-week real life week season, you're above a 3, then you advance to the next highest license, or you can push your safety rating all the way up to 4, and then it instantly advances you to the next level of license. And when you level up in license, you drop back down to 2.5, 2, something like that. Right. Now, the thing they do to keep you from bouncing, if you drop below 1, you get immediately demoted to the next lowest class. And if you're below a 2 at the end of the season, they drop you class. The way that they keep you from bouncing around too much is whenever you cross a whole number threshold. So if you go from like 2.86 to 3, it actually bumps you up all the way to 3.4. On the flip side, if you come down and you go from a 3.2 to a 2.98, they drop you an extra 0.4 points, so that there's always a gap there between you and the number rating, and you're always like sort of safely in between numbers. And it seems really harsh because you can have a few bad races and drop all the way down, but like that is more effective than having systems in place to keep players who should be at a lower rating from racing with people who are consistently racing at a higher rating. And that is, those harsher systems when you're talking about high level play are just, they just are better for everyone involved, because if you're somebody who is struggling to keep that rank and just falling repeatedly, not so much your situation, because like you said, you're playing with people who are like AFKs and griefers, but if your skill level is ultra 2 or whatever, then you shouldn't be in ultra 4, but you also shouldn't be pinballing back and forth between ultra 3 and 4 and 3 and 1 and 2 either. So it's a little frustrating.
So like it's really nitpicky stuff, but it is, if you're going to take those systems seriously and you're going to invest the time, it's the kind of stuff you do want to see addressed, or kind of, you know, like it again, it's like you don't really want to play with straight up beginners in your high level matchmaking. I'm fine with that in like the casual modes. It's like, no, those are for fun. That's for like whatever. If we lose, who cares? But this one, it's like, man, it's just annoying. So
and typically ranked play is in, you know, like I play a little bit of Rocket League here and there with some of the people that I race with, and one of them's really good. He plays with us with basically a Smurf account, because not so much because he wants to stomp newer players, but because we would get in impossible matches if we played with him. And then the rest of us are
that in Dota.
The rest of us are roughly similar skill level, and you know, we're like average Rocket League players, and the I forgot where I was going with this. You had said that the Pokemon playing with that's what I was going to say. In Rocket League, you want to play ranked because you're going to get better quality matches. When you play casual, people are basically just clowning around, like they're like trying to score on themselves, or it's like really, really good players warming up and you'll just get completely stomped. You get like 1 in 10 games are actually good in casual, so you usually play 1 or 2 to warm up and get like the controller warmed up in your hands, get your hands stretched,
get it nice and toasty,
and then you go into ranked, because ranked is where the good quality matches are. And what I find frustrating about these systems in stuff like Pokemon is that because it's such a carrot on the stick approach to ranked play, it's like, yes, you get higher quality matches, I guess, but it's kind of 50-50, and it's, people bounce around between ranks so much that until you're deep, like at this point, maybe it's shaken out a little bit, but the season's going to be over by the time people are really at the appropriate rank. So it's a little, the rank system in that game for sure is a little frustrating. If I cared about it beyond having fun casually, it would be quite frustrating. I could never do the grind that you did, because I know I would get really mad at it.
Like I kind of did it just as an experiment, just to see, like poke at the system, see how hard it goes, and like just to have the conversation we just had, to know like, okay, what parts of it are good and bad, and what can be improved, and what kicks ass. So what's
good about it is the core gameplay is really solid, in my opinion. It's definitely one of my favorite games of the year. And so I think all of those things are like, for a game that, I know it had betas, you played in the betas, but for a game that didn't have an extensive open beta period, I think these issues are actually pretty minimal compared to a lot of games. And I think there's ways that they can adjust and improve them. And the fact that, frankly, it's not Nintendo making this game and it's Tencent makes me more inclined to believe they will work on these issues
Yeah.
and it won't just stagnate. And so I'm hoping that they solve some of these problems in the future, and that some of the issues shake themselves out. The one thing that I actually think they need more than anything else is a better player reporting system.
100%.
That's the biggest issue. That's actually part of why I started to play less, was because I encountered people who were, like you're saying, like just intentional griefers, and it's like I can't even feel like I'm doing much of anything to prevent this person from doing this in the future, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, the reporting system's not great, though. I will say, if someone AFKs, which happens more than you would expect, the game does seem to detect that they were AFK. So if you report them at the end, you automatically get a message back that says, hey, this person has lost 10, whatever they call it, respect points or whatever, fair play points.
Yeah.
So,
and at least they have that fair play system in place.
Yeah, at least. I won't say it's the best, but like, yeah.
No, yeah.
So yeah, conclusion, if you're playing it casually, playing it with friends, doing it for fun, using it to learn, excellent game. Ranked system has good ideas, but some poor execution that they could totally iron out. It's just, at the moment, the rank system, I don't know if it's worth fully dedicating to and getting to masters, but if you do, the game quality does go up, even though you do still run into some bullshit.
Yeah.
So yeah, good game, flawed game, but still really good game.
Yeah. Well, we'll do a little back and forth. Speaking of some ranked systems and how they work, I think I've been playing a little bit of a game called Hunt Showdown.
Oh yeah.
Which is a game that has been around for quite a while now. It was in early access for a long time, and has been out of early access for like a year or so now, at least. And the initial pitch on it was like battle royale with PvE elements. And I always wanted to get into it because sort of horror Western stuff is very high on my list of favorite aesthetics. And that is totally this game. I mean, this game is like you're using 6-shooters and Winchester rifles that they call Winfields, but whatever. And shooting zombies and gross water monsters and demons and stuff. It's like very up my alley from that perspective, but it never really clicked for me because it was a mixture of like being kind of afraid of some of the boss mechanics, and then also just being terrified of losing stuff, because it's a game where when you die, you lose stuff. So structurally, if you haven't seen this game, it's a game where you have a hunter that you equip with a loadout of weapons and perks and stuff. And then you matchmake and you're dropped onto this map. And it's designed for teams of 3, but you can play as a solo or duo also, which I'll get into in a couple minutes. But then the goal once you get onto the map is you're looking around the map for clues, which are these sites that are glowing on your screen when you use your detective vision or whatever, which this game has. They call it dark sight. So you go to these sites, you investigate the clue, and then the whole time there's a bunch of PvE enemies. Mostly they're like simple zombies, but there's also like dogs that are scary and can make a bunch of noise if you get near them, and they'll attack you. There's noise traps like crows and horses that are laying down and near death that can go crazy if you walk near them. It's all pretty rough, dark stuff. Not for the faint of heart, because it's pretty brutal. And you're avoiding all these enemies or dealing with them. However, getting these clues, the clues lead you to a boss, which is usually completely terrifying. Things like a horrific spider kind of made out of fused corpses, and like there's like a butcher guy that wears a pig head on his head, and we fought this like bird lady last night that's really freaky and can throw down concertina wire all over the place, which is like razor wire. And you kill the boss and then try to banish the boss, which is you have to sit near the corpse for a while, And as you do it, all the players in the match are alerted to the fact that you're banishing the boss, so they can all come try to kill you. Once the boss has been banished, you take their coins and then you try to escape the match through one of the exits. So,
So it's a win condition.
yes.
Okay, got it.
The thing about the game that's interesting, what I didn't realize is how much Escape from Tarkov kind of took influence from Hunt Showdown. I don't know that Tarkov would have, I assume that Hunt was a huge influence on them even making Tarkov in the first place, to be honest. Because what I didn't understand is in Hunt, you can also completely just like get some clues, kill some enemies, and extract. You don't actually have to go for the boss if you don't want to. At a certain point, it doesn't make sense to play if you're not going to do that. But like you can definitely go in and just try to level up a character. And that's important because when your characters die, they're gone. You have to start a new character over, basically. And that sounds awful, probably to a lot of people. But the way the characters work, they actually level pretty fast. So you don't necessarily lose a dozen hours when a character dies. You might lose like a couple hours of working on that character, but you're also doing this kind of meta progression where as you're winning, you're gaining money and unlocks that you can then put on your new characters to kind of help them early on. So you're always sort of progressing. You're not like going backwards really ever in terms of progression. So the permadeath though does add a layer of like, I really don't want to die. It does make you, it's just enough to make you kind of go, I really don't want to lose all my stuff. So I'm going to try.
Well, it's kind of like an XCOM kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. It makes it tenser. And for the first 10 ranks, which I'm still in actually, of the like overall meta progression, you don't lose characters when you die, but I'm at rank 9. So I'm going to hit 10 soon here. And then my characters will be at risk. But also in 3 games, I've leveled a character to level 40 and the max cap for each character is 50. So that gives you any indication, like there were 3 very good games, but it's not like it takes dozens of hours to level a character. I've probably spent 2 hours on this character and they're already level 40. So
that's cool.
It could be worse. So anyway, the thing about it that I think if you've looked at this game before and found it too daunting as a single player, they've done some really cool things. I don't know how recent all these things are because I hadn't really tried to get into it in like a year. And maybe some of this stuff was in there then and I didn't notice it. I didn't try very hard. But the first thing is now there's a whole single player mode. So if you want to play it single player, there's a bunch of unlocks you can get that will transfer to, well, in fact, they're only really useful in multiplayer. So you can play a bunch of single player. You can explore the maps and fight the PvE enemies. There's challenges that are like parkour challenges where you're running through these checkpointed races. There's shooting challenges where they put you like in a tower and you have to fight waves of enemies and stuff. There's all kinds of cool ways to practice single player now. And as you do it, you unlock like, oh, you leveled your trial rank to 10. So you got a revolver for free that's now in your loadouts.
And so would that revolver unlock be global for any future characters? Like you just have that at your account level? Okay.
Yeah. So what it does is it just puts it in your inventory. So you're getting like a free gun basically that you would normally have to buy. You could lose it if you die. But it's giving you stuff that the single player is at least having an impact on the larger game. So it's not just a practice mode.
Okay.
And that stuff's pretty cool. And then the bigger thing for me, there had always been, or for not always, but for a long time, there has been a solo mode, which is kind of cool, where you play more of a traditional battle royale, where you have like 20 players or something, and the last player standing, and it's all solo players, and the last player standing gets to keep their hunter. Like when you load in, it gives you a hunter that's got a random loadout, and the player that wins gets to keep them and add them to their roster, and they start off with like a higher level. So that mode's been in there for a while and it's cool enough, but I like the idea of playing the main mode with less than 3 people. And what they've done now, and this is kind of the dovetail off of the matchmaking conversation about Pokemon, you can see your MMR just like on the screen in the lobby screen, and it displays as like pips from 1 to 5, and it goes to half pips too. And you can actually look at a graph, and I'm not positive if the graph is of all players or just players online, but it'll show you the bell curve of players and their MMRs.
Hmm.
So you can see that like most players have a 4 out of 5, and I think it's currently online. And when you group up with other players, it'll show your team's MMR. So you can compare that to the graph and see where you're at compared to most players. And it kind of helps you to determine like how your match is going to look in terms of players. If there's no one on at your MMR, you can expect to have to play people of a slightly higher MMR. But at least you kind of know where the player base is at currently in terms of MMR. And then on top of that, it averages the team's MMR. So like, for instance, last night I have like a 2.5, and one of my friends same rating, because we're both pretty low level, and we played with a friend of ours who is very high level, and he has like a 4, I think, or a 4.5 or something, and it averages out our MMR using that team MMR thing. So we were at like a 3.5 or something.
Yeah,
and
I think that's smart. That's pretty smart.
And then and I don't think it would be smart necessarily if we were talking about like esports competition, but at esports level, one, I don't think this game is really designed for that or fits that particularly well. And then on top of that, everyone would be a 5. You wouldn't be playing with 2.5 level players.
Which that's where the problem, well, not the problem, but you start seeing that with Dota matches where back when it was purely numerical, like now they use the kind of rank system, but when it was like above 5.5k, at some point everyone was just really good, so the actual number didn't matter.
Exactly. And so in this case, we're talking about just trying to create like high quality matches for players. And what's really interesting and cool is when you play duo or solo, it actually makes your team MMR lower than your average MMR, and so that you get ranked with 3-player teams that are of a lower skill level than you.
Right, because they have the advantage of having potential communication and 3
people, frankly, 3 bodies. Exactly. There's extra people to revive each other and stuff. So what that means is it makes it feel like way less daunting to jump into a match as a solo player, because it's like, oh, well, I'm going to be playing with people that I'm relatively new. I'm okay at the game so far, but I'm going to be matched with people who are a little lower skilled than me. And it interestingly kind of solves, not that this would work for a lot of other games, but it solves a problem that a lot of people have with skill-based matchmaking systems. Like in Call of Duty, the last few years, there's been a huge outrage from a section of the community, which is, in my opinion, silly anyway, and they're wrong. But there's this frustration around skill-based matchmaking because people want to pub stomp. Basically, they don't want to be ranked with people of their skill. When they play Call of Duty, they want to just ruin everybody else's night by destroying them. And that is, in my opinion, a kind of shitty mentality in the first place. But what a system like this in Hunt Showdown lets you do is, if you want to be a solo player and go fight a bunch of lower skilled players, you can totally do that. But then you're also disadvantaging yourself in terms of like you said, like teams that could communicate and potentially take you out, and people who can revive each other and stuff. So it feels like a good trade-off.
The revival is probably a big part of it.
Yeah, because you don't necessarily find people who are always communicating with each other anyway. You kind of want to avoid using the in-game communication because it's proximity and everyone can hear you talking.
Yep, totally.
Which can lead to some fun stuff. So anyway, all this stuff aside, all that stuff is part of why I've had an easier time getting into it this time. I played a few games this week. The first one was solo, a few good ones. The first one was solo, and I actually managed to kill the spider boss and extract its coin myself. Nice. In that game, I didn't see any other players, which is because of the other thing that I didn't understand before, is that these games are only 12 players. I never realized that. I thought that they were like 100-player matches or something.
Oh, okay.
Or not that much, but like many players. So I was always terrified, but they're only 12 players, which makes it feel a lot less daunting, because it's like, oh, there's at most 4 squads, or 6 duos, or a mix is really what it's going to be.
That sounds fine. That sounds less intimidating.
Yes. And then a couple of friends and I also played a game where we last night where we did the whole process of the game where we managed to go from place to place to find clues. At one point we heard people shooting, which is another huge thing that this game nails perfectly. All the guns have a slightly different sound. They all sound really good, and you can actually identify what kinds of guns people are using if you're good and listen closely.
Totally.
And you can tell how far away they are too.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of PUBG. Like,
Yep.
That game was really good for that, where you could tell when exactly what sniper rifle someone was using by the sound. So yeah, that's great.
And because this game is in no way, shape, or form about loot, instead it's all about bringing your loadouts in. I mean, you find consumables in the environment and you find ammo, but it is not about looting containers. So it means that you can be really focused on stuff, and you can really like, the fact that they have that sniper rifle means that they brought it in. So know, oh, they brought a sniper rifle in that took up a large slot in their inventory. So if we can get close, we know that they don't have any close range weapons. They might have like a sawn-off or a revolver, but that's not going to be as good as if they had a, you know, full-size shotgun or something for up close or whatever. So that stuff's really cool. So we played a game where we were getting the clues. We heard some close shooting at one point and took cover and tried to watch for them. We had to open up on a meathead, which is one of these gross monsters that drops leeches. And you have to be very careful about how you decide when to fight the PvE enemies, because enemies can hear you, obviously. So if you just go loud and shoot at a bunch of zombies, then they know you're there. The other players. So we eventually got to the boss area, and there were 2 squads there that hadn't seen each other, but they both saw us and they both started shooting at us. And then they realized that they were both there and at the boss area. And they had already started fighting the boss. And so then we took cover and we were able to systematically take out both squads. I think it was 2 squads of 2. And then move in, take out the boss, take the coins, and extract. And then the third game that I played that was awesome was this was with my friend who's really good at it. We spawned, and the first clue location we went to happened to be where the boss was. So we found the boss immediately, killed the boss immediately, and then started banishing and got the coins. But because it was so fast, it tells everybody where you are once you've killed the boss and when you're banishing.
Right.
So then everyone was like, oh shit, we just have to go there. So we're holed up in this boss building with all the doors locked up with traps in front of all of them, basically just like avoiding the windows. But there's a bunch of like little holes that they can shoot through if they can see you through the walls. So you have to be very careful how you move around. And there's just like gunfire outside, hails of bullets as other players shoot it out to try to like get into a position to take us out. And we're like, what do we do? Do we want to run? Do we want to hole up here and turtle? So we ended up staying. And then eventually the people who killed the other boss, because there's 2 bosses on every map. Okay. We saw them you can sort of see players who have on the map who have bounty tokens, the things you get for killing the bosses. They're little lightning bolts on the map, and you can't see their exact location, but you can see an approximate location of where they are. And one of the guys is like, the other bounty people are coming here. And we were like, oh shit, they're going to try to take our counters. And at one point we like, after the game, we realized one of them is actually a streamer. I don't think he was streaming the game we were in, but they were definitely like on the higher end of the player skill for the match. And so we ended up sitting in that warehouse for 20 minutes, waiting it out with them. And they were like talking to us, not in a shitty way. They were just kind of taunting, like, you can stay in there all night and like, you should come on out. And it was very funny. And we eventually managed to kill all of them, take their bounty coins that they had gotten from the boss they killed, and extract. So we ended up with a clean sweep of the full map and got like the full rewards that you could possibly get. And it was awesome. And it came from like an extreme degree of patience, because we were just sitting in there. Like, they would come up and open one of the doors. And like, the best moment was, there was a point where 2 of them were outside with the door open, but it was trapped. So they didn't want to walk in because they knew that you can jump over the traps, but then you're like kind of at a disadvantage because you're jumping and it's very easy to just kill you while you're in midair jumping. So my one friend was sitting there, shot and killed one of them that was carrying a bounty coin. And then the other one of them tried to come and res the person. But so they kept closing this door, and I was sitting next to the door opening it every time they'd close it. And on voice, the guy was like, please stop doing that. I was like, no.
That's great.
And then he had to give up on reviving his friend, and they just bled out because he couldn't get a safe spot to revive them from, because my other friend was sitting there looking at a shotgun. And there was like a door on top of the building that they could come in through, but we couldn't climb out of. It was like a one way, you drop in and you're done. Sure. So we had to keep watching that because they kept opening it and kind of poking their heads in. And I shot a couple of them from there. It was just a really great standoff where they had a shotgun with ammunition that could fire through the wall too. So if they knew where we were near the wall, then they could just shoot through the wall and the bullets would penetrate and kill you. So it was like just a very tense standoff for like 20 minutes with some pretty good natured banter back and forth. We were like, the one guy was like, thanks for the bounty coin, after we killed the person that had the coin and grabbed it. And it was just a really, really cool experience all around. That game is one of those sorts of things where if you can try to get a little bit of, like, if you can try to get in and have it click at all, then it creates a lot of very unique experiences.
Yeah, games with like that with really good emergent gameplay are fascinating. Like, it's kind of, that was what made things like PUBG so appealing when they first came out. Of those kinds of moments, of those kinds of like stories that you can tell people of like, oh, Absolutely. We were holed up in the air base, and then we got into this big firefight. Then a bunch of zombies heard it and came running over. But it's like, yeah, like this sounds much smaller in scale but in a lot of ways more dynamic.
Yes. And I think realizing that scale is really what helped me to realize that it's something that I really like. And Tarkov is a very similar thing, more focused on loot, but it has a very similar scale. And I find those kinds of emergent games more interesting at this point than something, I still enjoy like playing. Call of Duty. Yeah, I still enjoy stuff like Call of Duty, but I think it's part of why I'm very excited for Battlefield, because it kind of merges that emergent gameplay with more simple, go here, shoot people stuff.
It's like the emergent gameplay in Battlefield is just chaos.
Yes, yeah, and it looks like the new one's going to be that to a T.
God, I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Hunt Showdown, it's like 50% off right now, which is kind of cool too. I think it's a good one if you like multiplayer games and you can hang with the horror elements. It's a good one to just have in your library. Even if I don't know that I'm going to continue to play it every couple days for months, but it's a good one to dip into here and there.
For me, like, it sounds way more appealing to play that than something like Back 4 Blood or Left 4 Dead. Like,
absolutely, yes.
Like those, like, this isn't just to randomly dig on those, but like they kind of, it sounds like they occupy a similar space in a Steam library where like someone will be like, "What game do you want to play tonight?" And it's like, "Oh, we haven't played Hunt Showdown in a while. Let's play some of that." Like, it's kind of one of those games rather than like, okay, every Tuesday and Thursday we're gonna get together and play this game like super hard. Like, no, it's like, yeah, if you're gonna have like a one-off, like, let's play a couple rounds of this, then it sounds great for that.
It's complex enough that I wouldn't want to
be away from it.
You have to. It's not that you couldn't be away from it, but you do have to spend the initial time with it to kind of grasp the mechanics, I think.
Oh, sure,
and I'm sort of still doing that because there's still a lot of weapon mechanics I don't fully understand. And then of course, again, it's also got to be, you have to hang with the horror aesthetic, and you have to be able to, like, I have a silenced pistol right now that's really good because silenced weapons are very good in this game for dealing with the PvE enemies. They take a fairly big hit in terms of their capabilities against players because the silencers reduce their damage, I want to say. But they're really good against PvE enemies because if you shoot a zombie in the head, it doesn't matter if your gun doesn't do that much damage, it'll kill it. So
and other players aren't going to hear you. So
and otherwise you have to use melee to deal with them. So you're either using like crossbows or silence guns or melee. Anyway, though, this silence gun, to reload it, when I hit reload, if the whole chamber is empty, it's like he spins the chamber, puts one bullet in, rotates, one bullet in,
Oh,
rotates, one bullet in, rotates. Like if you can't deal with that kind of, I have a
Yeah.
Springfield rifle right now that you have to reload it after every shot, and the reload animation is like chamber open, bullet in, chamber closed, and then bolt that works the bolt. It's like very methodical and deliberate in terms of the combat and pacing with the weapons. So if you can't deal with that, it's probably not for you. But if you like all that stuff and you like the horror aspect, I think it's totally worth picking up, even as a solo player at this point. There's enough to do.
So what you're saying is it's the Dark Souls of Battle Royale.
I still would give that crown to Tarkov, because Tarkov is like, the thing about Hunt Showdown is you spend, like I was saying, you spend like a couple hours grinding out a character with a few good matches. And then if they die, it's like, okay, well, I also gained like 10 player ranks in that time or whatever, and unlocked a bunch of stuff. That'll make it easier next time. Tarkov is like, I spent 40 hours grinding out this like god tier gun that I've built from 35 different parts. And then I spawned and died immediately to a scav, and it's gone. And I mean, you can insure stuff in Tarkov so that you get it back, but you only get it back if a player doesn't loot it. So Tarkov is very rough. It's a very cool game, but it is extremely brutal. Speaking of, I don't know, getting one no scope one shot from people across the map. You've been playing a strategy game about people.
Well, before jumping into that, I have one other little note about you mentioned skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt, but so I actually heard one case that made sense to me against skill-based matchmaking, and it actually came from Bread Radio, listening to Greg Duplisky, who's the co-host of that, kind of talking about why specifically he wasn't into it, because he's more in the competitive side of things and plays relatively high level COD. And the thing he says is sometimes he gets hot and cold with the game, where it's like he'll play for like 2 months straight and get to a really high like skill level, like hidden MMR or whatever you want to call it, and he's like, I'm gonna take a 6 months break, and that number doesn't deteriorate at all. And it's like he jumps back in 6 months later, and then he's playing against like really high level players, even though he's really rusty and hasn't played for like a long time. And even if it's just doing casual matches or whatever, it's still using that hidden MMR. And it's like, in that case, the skill-based matchmaking does kind of suck, in that like, you never have a chance to play against, like, not to say like stomping a game and poning a bunch of noobs is always the best thing, because when you're on the other end of that, it kind of sucks. But like, time does happen and real lives do happen, and sometimes like you might be really hot and heavy on a game for a month, and then you don't touch it and you want to come back and just maybe restart. But yeah, so that's like the one case I've heard in people complaining about skill-based matchmaking that made some sense to me.
Yeah, and nothing against Greg either, but I would say I still am always going to defer to the people who are like not sweaty at the game, wanting them to have a good time. And like, my argument to that would be, if you're getting back into the game, if you play for a couple of nights and get stomped by people that are at that level, your number will drop. So is it like better for you to have to is it better for the number to deteriorate over time so that then you jump back in and stomp some people getting back into it and getting your level up? Or is it better for you to jump back in and maybe ruin their games? Or is it better for you to jump back in and you have the bad games while you get stomped and your number drops? It's kind of like,
I don't know. True. That's totally fair. It's a hard balance.
It just always, again, I'm not talking about Greg, nothing against any of our friends in the podcasting world, video game podcasting world, but every single argument that I've heard against skill-based matchmaking always comes down to, I don't want to have the bad time, I want you to have the bad time. And I think that's hard for me to like feel to support that argument, I guess. And
I get it.
That's kind of why I've always been in favor of it. But I think that's a better angle for sure than I've seen from people who clearly are just like, I want to kill people and not have it be hard. uh,
Yeah, totally.
which is true of most of the complainers.
Yeah. Anyways, strategy games. So yeah, I haven't played a ton of this game, but like a couple hours, which for some games is a lot. For a game like 12 minutes, that sounds like it's too much time. But for sorry, I had to get a dig in because I haven't been here for a few weeks.
Yeah, it's
12
fine.
minutes 12 minutes sounds terrible.
It's not very good.
No.
I've seen some people that really like it, and I'm sorry if my shit talking has been offensive to you. I just think that game sucks ass.
I've not seen many people who are into it. I've seen people who are okay. I, I haven't played 12 minutes, and I'm not going to talk about it for more than like 30 seconds. But yeah, I've like mostly seen people who were like, "Oh, this was kind of interesting for the first 45 minutes," and then after that, they're like, "Oh, this is tedious."
And
Um,
also, what the fuck?
and also, that's not even getting into the
Yeah.
stuff. Anyways, I've been playing a little bit of Humankind.
I also played a
Which
little bit of this.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you did. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. I played it. I was intending to play it ever since I saw the trailers come out because
Hmm.
I like 4X games. I like Civ. And it's like, oh, this is like, it looks like kind of, it's Sega who made it. And
It's
it looks
actually
like,
they published it, and
oh,
the
they published it.
developers
Okay.
are Amplitude Studios, which are the designers of Endless
Oh,
Space and Endless
yeah, yeah,
Legend,
yeah. That
which
makes
is one of my
sense,
favorite
actually.
strategy developers. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize it was Amplitude. That makes a
mhm.
lot of sense. Um, Cool. Well, yeah, because like I was interested in it because you don't really get a lot of high budget, really intense systems 4X games these days as
Yeah,
much as you used to. Like they're far and fewer between. There you still find them if you kind of look at like the really niche developers and like the niche communities, but they're usually not like Sega caliber things, right?
right.
Like
And I think it's because Firaxis just kind of cornered the market on that. Like,
yeah, because they perfected it. Like
there's plenty of
frankly.
arguments you can make about which Civ is better. And yes, when Civ games come out, they're usually kind of not as good as the previous one while they build up
Yeah.
expansions and stuff, but
And
they're all always at least good.
what was the space one that they put out was and
Beyond
everybody
Earth.
Beyond Earth, that wasn't very good.
No, that was
Um,
probably the weakest one, but I mean,
but
that's
it's
one
like
weak one out of 7 games.
yeah, like which is just to say they can miss.
Yeah.
And same with like XCOM Chimera Squad, which I think was also a Firaxis game. That game wasn't very good. Um, but regardless, like 4X games when they're good, they're good. And I would say Humankind is good.
It's interesting
It's
at the very least.
it's fine. Like
Yeah.
I would say it is kind of like how we were talking about Dota to Pokemon Unite, how it's taking a very complex game and simplifying it. I would feel that Humankind is like more simplified Civ. Like not to say it's that same level of simplification. It's just it's much more streamlined in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
it also has a different focus. Like
Yeah.
which it's using a lot of similar systems, like you're still building up science and you're building up your population and you're taking tiles around you and there's territory control and stuff, but that's kind of just 4X games in general. But like this game is very 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 clearly influenced by Civ in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
and which is good. I think if you're going to take influence from something, take it from the best. Like there's definitely like yeah, Endless Legend is its own thing, Stellaris is its own thing, like Sins of a Solar Empire, like there's lots of stuff you can pull from Alpha Centauri if you want to stay within Sid Meier's space, like Galactic Civ, or like there's tons of stuff. Europa Universalis, those games are great, but this one is very clearly Civ, but not
Yeah.
Civ. And I would say a couple hours in, I don't feel the need to do that one more turn that you get with Civ.
Yeah. That's
Like
where I fell too.
it's like it's fine, but it just feels like the stuff you're working towards is either um, ambiguous and random enough to where you don't feel like you have that much control, in that there's like lots of random
Hmm.
events that just pop up. It's like, oh, in the early, like I'll stick with the early ages. It's like, oh, you found someone, like you have now made a city and it's the first city that's ever existed because you're coming from like the Neanderthal ages essentially, going from villages or like tribal communities into towns into cities into whatever, and like, oh, we're now in cities, we're now in these established homes, and this one guy, he found a bunch of mushrooms and he's been hoarding them. What do we do? Do we
Yeah.
kick him out of the village? Do we let him stay in the tribe? Do we like, oh, awesome, where'd you find these? Or like, like you're just given these choices, but like it's very driven like that in kind of like an FTL kind of way, to
Yeah.
where it's hard to predict what you're gonna do. And which is fine, I don't mind it, but like Civ, the whole thing is you were working down tech trees, you were like, okay, I'm gonna aim for this kind of society, and like I'm gonna
Yeah.
build my tech tree in this very specific way that's gonna min max like how I intend to win. Whereas this one, it's like you're kind of doing everything all at once, and then you're getting these random events that kind of push you in random directions, which is fine.
And
But
even the structure of it is such, like Civ, one of the first things you learn when you start Civ is how to win. Like if Civ,
oh sure,
one of the things that I think of when I play 4X games is I want, and this is a personal preference, this is not necessary, this is more of a taste thing. I want it to feel like a board game that would be way too complicated to actually play in real life with
absolutely.
way too many numbers. And that's what Civ does, is it has a very clear set of rules that you can read from start to finish if you go through the whole encyclopedia within Civ.
Civpedia.
Yeah.
That's what it's called in game, I think.
Yeah.
But
yes. And from there it becomes it's a strategy game. You say from the start, okay, I'm going to play Byzantines and I'm going to focus military, and I'm going to side focus on some science, and that's going to be my strategy for this game. And then you play your strategy out. With Humankind, I don't know. It may be that there's a point you get to where you have a similar relationship with it, but certainly from the beginning, it's like, I don't know, man. Just go play some game, man. Put a city down. It's pretty looking.
Yeah, and it's weird. When you mentioned the Byzantine thing, like you're picking that from the start, but in Humankind, you're just starting very neutral. Like you're just starting as a society, and
which
then
I
once
actually
you
think
reach,
is a cool twist.
It's a good idea. It's a cool idea. And then once you reach a certain age, you can pick like, oh, I want to be like Egyptian, or like this Chinese army or civilization, or like Byzantines or whatever. But the problem I ran into is I got there a little late. So like half of those were gone. And it's like, oh, the one I would have picked is just gone at this point. Okay. Just like, that was weird.
And it happens again. I don't know if you got to the point where you hit the next like cultural jump. That's around the time I sort of petered off. But like it does have interesting ideas around like you can maintain that ancient civilization going forward and get certain bonuses, or you can go, okay, well, now I started as Egyptians, but my culture is going to change to the British or something. Sure. And it feels weird because for a game that has so many narrative elements, I don't really understand the narrative of my Egyptians who built magnificent pyramids waking up one day and going, what if we built a big clock instead? Chip, chip. And it's like, why did we go from being Egyptian to English?
To be fair, you do kind of get that in Civ too with the wonders.
You do,
but it's less narrative-y.
Exactly. That's the thing, is the wonders feel more like, again, like board game pieces. They feel more like things that you draw from a deck and go, oh, I'm going to play this card. Whereas in Humankind, it does seem like they want you to feel like there's a narrative behind your progression, which I think is cool. It's a different kind of game, but I think it's cool. But it does feel, it was very jarring. I ended up keeping Egyptians because I felt weird just like totally 180ing our culture to going from like, like master crafts people to brutal imperialists. Felt like a weird switch
out of nowhere.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is a little frustrating with Humankind is in Civ, they make it very clear early on that like your cities are your, they're pieces on a board. They're like very important. And there's also a balance you have to strike between how many cities you have and how many resources you have to support them and stuff.
Yeah, and the connections between them, if like Civ 6, like the routes between them and stuff. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's not that it's an easy concept to grasp, but it does feel like there is something to get your head around there. Whereas in Humankind, your settlements like start as outposts, and it's not immediately clear. I'm sure there's a reason if I went digging. It's not immediately clear why I would want a city over an outpost, or like when it makes sense to leave a city as an outpost and not advance it to a city. And then on top of that, it doesn't feel like there's
Totally.
a clear building progression once you have a city. There's like buildings you can make, but in Civ, it's like, I'm going to rush a granary in this city because I want it to be a population center. This city is more of a military outpost. I don't really care that much about its population growth. So I'm just going to put walls up as soon as I can. And it feels, again, like you are playing a strategy video game. Whereas Humankind to me felt much more like they were like, I don't know, do you want to put some gardens here? They might be cool if you put gardens in this place and you put a factory over here. And I was kind of like, okay, I know this is increasing my, I forget what they call it in this game. It's called FIDS in in the endless games. It's different in this one because there isn't dust.
It's similar. There's like another acronym.
Yeah.
But I can't remember either.
And so I just didn't feel like I had much strategy behind how I was building my cities out. And it was a little like, I don't know, it was a little frustrating. I also don't particularly like the way that they handle combat in this game, which is it kind of turns into a mini battle on some hex boards.
Yeah, I did a little bit of it, but it was weird.
And where I'm going with all this, did you play much Endless Legend?
No, not really.
This game, I'm sure there are tons of number tweaks under the hood. I'm sure there's a lot of things they've done to develop it out. But this game feels very much like a Civ skinned Endless Legend from the first couple hours. Endless Legend has a very similar city construction system, and it also has very similar combat, and it also has lots of the random events. And I think with Endless Legend, it works for me real hard because it's like, you pick a culture from the start and it's fantasy stuff. So and they have a very interesting view of fantasy, just like they have a very interesting view of sci-fi. So it's like, oh, I'm playing crystal people who their cities are just like things they plop down in the crystals, they plop down in the dirt that exponentially grow. And it's totally different mechanically than the human nomad faction. And so it feels more like you're playing a role-playing game in Endless Legend. Or to use the board game example again, it's like the difference between something like Root and something like, I don't know, Scythe is a bad example because that's closer to Root. The difference between something like Scythe or Root and I guess Risk. Risk isn't a very good game, but it's not as good a game as Civilization, but we'll use it as an example here, where it's almost less about winning the game and more about how interesting all of the pieces fit together. And so I think it really clicks for me with Endless Legend, whereas with Humankind, it just feels a little meandering. And I got to a point where I was like, I think I'd rather just go start a game of Endless Legend because I get very similar stuff out of it and it feels more interesting to me.
For that was actually very similar to my conclusion, whereas like, I kind of want to just go see what the expansions for Civ 6 have been like, because I haven't dove deep into those with the weather stuff and the like. But like, Humankind isn't bad. I imagine if this was someone's like very first introduction to the genre, it would actually be a pretty good streamlined experience where you can kind of get away with a lot. Like it's not as punishing as like other 4Xs. Like, because like the thing with Civ for me, especially like if there's a new one, like the first rounds of Civ 4 versus 5 versus 6, you kind of know you're going to lose, where you don't understand all the mechanics from the start. And like you don't realize until 30, 40, 100 turns in, they're like, oh, I made a really big mistake at like turn 7. Okay, next time I play, I'm not going to have that issue. Like that's how Civ goes for me a lot of the time, where it's like, I know that the first round is going to be a burner, whereas it feels like this one is just trying to push you towards a win from the very start. And it doesn't, which is fine. It's just, it doesn't, like, I don't know, something about it isn't clicking for me.
I agree.
But it's not bad is the thing.
No, I think this game is going to be first of all, it's on Game Pass, which is,
and I think that's great.
Excellent. And I will probably play it a little bit more because I still have it installed, and I think it's interesting. And I love that it's on Game Pass because,
perfect.
Clearly a lot of work went into this game. I think that their asking price like $40 or something, totally reasonable, because it's got a huge amount of art and music and like design in the mechanics. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think that there's a certain kind of player who maybe is coming from either they don't play strategy games at all, or they typically play more narrative strategy games like Crusader Kings or something like that, who maybe will find this game very appealing because it is more of a story, and maybe they will connect the dots in their heads between their, you know, the faction that they chose, the country that they chose, and then the next level up of that or whatever. So I think that there's definitely value there for them. I think like at the end of the day, it's kind of going back a little bit, but my biggest issue with the game is that it feels like you're just kind of progressing forward and that the choices don't necessarily make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Or that I don't get why I'm picking them. And I think part of that is because of the way I like to be onboarded to these kinds of games. I suspect if I played 3 or 4 games of this, I might start to see patterns that make me go, oh, well, okay, this makes sense to do here. I want to rush this to get this culture, etc. And I wonder if for the players that I'm talking about that are maybe more into narrative focused games, if this method of onboarding will be more effective for them than a more standard, like, here's tooltips for everything every step of the way up front, now go and play, that I would kind of prefer. But I think like you could probably argue that I could just read everything about how to play the game, but I think the issue is that I already like Endless Legend and I know how to play it. I already like Civ and I know how to play it. And do I really want to go through that learning process again for this game? But for players who don't already have those relationships, they may find it really appealing.
Yeah, and like, to not go too deep into it, because I think we've talked about Human Coin quite a bit. They do offer some decent tutorial videos that you can watch.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a lot of them. And I watched like a couple just to be like, okay, what's this like? Like, I watched the very first one, is like, oh, this is like, what is a strategy game? And I was like, okay, we don't need this. And then I went to like one of the deeper systems, and it was like, oh, I already know all this from Civ. So I get what you mean, where it's like, it's similar enough to where it feels like you should just be able to kind of translate stuff even in your head. Just be like, oh, okay, so this is like the happiness system. This is like the production system. This is like the culture system. Like it's analogous, and you can kind of connect those wires in your head. Whereas like, I want to be able to discern what the new stuff is, like what mechanics didn't exist in Civ or whatever.
And in some cases, like the combat, and we can move on after this, but like in some cases, like the combat, structurally the combat's the same as Endless Legend. You like your guys kind of spread out on an area around the space that you engaged in the combat on. But in Humankind, the units are like Civ units. It's like warriors, spearmen. In Endless Legend, you are equipping your units with gear. So you are giving archers, like, you maybe find a legendary bow and you have a hero unit that has that bow and stuff. So the combat feels a lot more dynamic because it's not just like stock units running into each other. It's like, oh, I want to put this person here because they have +1 range from this bow that they got from doing this quest. And you start seeing that stuff fairly early in Endless Legend. So when I got to the combat in Humankind, I was like, oh, this is like Endless Legend combat, but it's not as interesting because it has less going on, which was a little frustrating. So yeah, anyway, I think it's still worth checking out for sure if you have 100%. An interest in strategy, because it's on Game Pass. Grab it there, play it a little bit.
Much lower barrier to entry than something like Crusader Kings, which is great. But like, like if you're looking for an intro to strategy games, I think Humankind is absolutely worth a play. If you're deep into strategy games, it's fine, but you're not going to find anything mind-blowing about it, in my opinion. Anyways, we got one more game.
I'll say two briefly. I remembered I did play one other game that I can talk about, but I didn't play very much of it, so it really only will take me a minute. I purchased the pre-purchase for a game called Icarus. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's a survival game. It's made by the original DayZ developer.
Oh, I did hear about this. Okay, I didn't know that's what it was called. Okay.
I'm vaguely excited about it because it's a concept that I find very interesting, which is it's a survival game, but instead of like buying a server with your friends, you're actually dropping into the world for timed sessions. Some of the ways that they're handling that is a little, my biggest concerns with this game are all on the technical side.
Well, DayZ was not known for its technical
Well,
prowess.
and it's not just the DayZ developer. It's like a team that has made other games paired
Okay.
up with the guy who made DayZ. And I don't know if he joined them just for this game or if
I
he
know his
has been
name.
there for a
Dean
while.
Hall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, they seem like a cool studio. So I've been in their Discord. They're really communicative. They seem really friendly and stuff.
Cool. Is it also Bohemia?
No, it is. What are they called? I think it might be Dean Hall that's on it. Maybe I'm wrong. It's one of the other people who worked on it, but they're called Rocket Works, people making it. Their biggest game prior was they made Stationeers,
I don't know that.
which not a very big game, but it's one that I had seen. I haven't played it. It seems pretty cool. It's a little bit like Space Engineers, but it's got its own thing going on. Kind of a cross between Space Engineers and Kerbal. Has like
That's
very
fun.
nightmarish characters because they're like human faces but on Kerbal bodies. It's horrific and intentionally horrific,
terrifying.
I think. Yes, it's a very goofy game. Anyway, Icarus is much more serious in tone, and it is a game where you pick a drop, you go in, you land on the ground, you get your stick, you get your rock, you make your pickaxe, you mine whatever to get stuff. You build a little palisade and with a bed inside to respawn when you die. And then so you go out. It's
Minecrafty, Rusty.
Rust is probably the best comparison, but there's no PvP, which is part of what's interesting to me. Is it's fully PvE game, which is something my friends like. And then it's also small group focused. It's like up to 8 players, which is another thing my friends like.
Valheim is similar, right? In that specific sense?
Structurally, it's more like Valheim. Visually and from a and gameplay wise, it's closer to Rust. But yes,
okay. Cool.
The thing that like I said that I think is interesting about it is it's not a game where you buy servers. We've done a few of these. We did Valheim and Ark most recently, and the typical arc, no pun intended, of this kind of game with my group of friends anyway is we get excited about it, we buy a server, we play like a fuckload of it over 2 to 3 weeks.
Hot and heavy month.
Yes. And basically, like we were playing Ark for like 6 hours a day for like 2 weeks. It was like everyone would basically like skip out of work early. Nobody that I work for listens to this, I don't think, but and I don't mean like at noon. Well, I didn't like they were playing at hours of the day where I was like, if your bosses knew you were playing Ark right now, you would be in trouble. I didn't get that bad, but it was like 3 p.m. hits. I started working at 7:30 a.m. Fuck that last half hour. Let's go ride some dinosaurs for a while. It was very fun. And then like fall off at like a cliff before we actually hit the end game because it just gets kind of like tedious to try to do the stuff you need to do to get to the end game.
Totally what happens to me with games like Terraria, but yeah,
and similar feel too. So anyway, Icarus is interesting to me because, and then what happens is I inevitably, or whoever has the server, cancels the server and we lose everything because like you could back it up, but are we ever really going to load that server again somewhere else? Probably not. We're probably going to want to start over if we play the game again. Because the interesting parts are the early game anyway. So anyway, Icarus is interesting to me because it's session based. The way they handle the hosting is a little weird. It's peer to peer, but it's like peer to peer, but they store all of your character progression on their servers, dedicated servers. And that matters because the structure is like you're playing a bunch, hot and heavy, that early game kind of feel, and you're doing it to try to get to this ore that you can take out and then use the ore on permanent stuff that you can take from session to session. And you're also leveling up skill trees for your character that you're gaining from experience by just doing everything gets you experience. So it's interesting structurally. Their peer-to-peer system is interesting because the way that it works is you're all connecting. It's determining the best host on its own, and then everybody connects to them. And then if that person leaves, it actually will, instead of killing the session, it just jumps to another person and migrates the hosting, which is interesting.
It's like torrents.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it means like if you drop in for like a 6-hour session or something, what can happen is, because the sessions range from like an hour to like 3 weeks. and it's weird. And
That is
I don't
weird.
know what happens if because there's a thing where like you can stay in the session and quit the game, and it'll like not keep running the session, but it'll keep running the timer. So like
That's weird.
as long as you're the one to restart the session, everyone can reconnect to you, and then you can quit, and then one of them is supposed to, it's I
That
don't know
puts
how
a-
all that's going to work.
that puts a really weird amount of like responsibility on the shoulders of whoever that
Potentially.
falls onto.
But I don't know exactly how it handles that. It may be that
Yeah.
it sends the game state to everybody. I don't really know. So
Yeah.
it's if that stuff
It's
works
interesting.
seamlessly, it could be really cool. I
Yeah,
will say,
like,
and then
it's
this
an
is
interesting idea.
kind of my last bit on it is they had their first beta weekend. So you could pre-order it, and they're doing they have like a roadmap of beta weekends. It's kind of like
Mhm.
early access, but they're doing it only on certain weekends. And this game is the system requirements for this game. I'm going to read them to you, and
Okay.
this won't mean anything to some of our listeners, but holy shit. So recommended, and I meet the minimum, and it ran like dog shit for me. So don't
Great.
even try it if you have the minimum. Again, first beta weekend, they might do a lot of optimization. It's not out till November. So this is squarely in the optimization phase of development.
Sure.
I'm hoping they optimize it. Right now, they want recommended an Intel i7 9700,
Okay.
32 gigabytes of RAM, and an NVIDIA RTX 3060 Ti.
My God. Yeah, that's rough.
And like
32 gigs of RAM. Why?
Yeah. And
That-
I
what
have
are they
16
doing with their
gigabytes of RAM
hosting?
because I don't use my gaming computer as like a audio processing
production
workstation.
machine,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I have like 16 has always been overkill for a long time for games. I'll probably buy more RAM because I think more games will probably start requiring that much if this game is. Not that this game is like some kind of like trendsetter or anything, but like
Yeah.
it kind of tends to be a trickle before it's a flood of games that have that kind of requirement. But
Yeah.
I will
That's
say
bonkers.
that it has DLSS, so it became playable to me
okay.
if I turned on DLSS. The problem is that all my friends have AMD cards, so
So they can't rely on that. Yeah.
no, and so it's not going to fucking run for them at all. When I tried it without DLSS, it was running at like 14 frames a second on my 2070 Super and
Yeah.
i7 6700K. It is like, I really hope they do some optimization because I'm not going to buy it unless they can get it optimized.
That's
because I can't. I'll buy more RAM because I just probably should. I'm not going to go hunting for a 3060 Ti and a new processor to play this game. Anyway, though, the actual gameplay, it seems like it could end up being cool. My problem is it's this first weekend. My friends didn't want to get into it, so I was playing solo, and like my shuttle landed. It's very pretty, I'll say. At least they're using all that requirements to make a gorgeous game.
Yeah, totally.
But I landed and I was like, okay, I'm getting oxygen to refill my oxygen. It's very Earth-like, the planet. Apparently there's cool, weird shit the further you go. But for the first weekends, they're just doing the like more Earth-like zones. So I'm hunting like goats and rabbits and stuff to get food. And I'm building a campfire and stuff. It has a very dynamic fire tech where it'll like spread fire and stuff like Far Cry 2.
Far Cry 2. Yeah.
And that stuff's cool. And then a couple wolves kind of came over to my camp, and I had a spear, and it was like trying to fight like a professional MMA fighter with like a pool noodle. The wolves were just like ravaging me, and every time you die, you lose experience points. So I like played for a half hour, got up to like level 3 or whatever, and then just got destroyed by these wolves. And every time you spawn, it was like right where I was spawning like near enough, and if I tried to do a corpse run, then the wolves would just kill me again. And you drop all your stuff when you die. So it was just a nightmare of like, I'm just getting killed by wolves over and over and over again.
So it's like the Dark Souls of survival. Not doing this again.
Yeah. It sucked. I think like,
yeah, that's annoying.
That's a specific enough problem that I don't want to condemn the game eternally for that. But
no,
it was a really
happens.
bad, like I spent like 10 minutes trying to get the game to run acceptably. and then I spent like 20 minutes actually having fun with it, but doing very basic survival game shit. And then I spend like 20 minutes getting killed by wolves over and over and again. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to cancel this pre-order and see what we hear when it gets closer to release.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talked about it for longer than I intended, but it was kind of it's an interesting
cool.
game. Some interesting ideas. I won't talk too long about my last thing either. But
though you could if you were so inclined.
I 2 weeks ago was, if you had asked me how I feel about Destiny, I'd be like, I fucking hate that game. I'm not sure how much.
Sorry, Destiny 2 or
Yeah.
Destiny in general?
Destiny 2. Well, I mean, you kind of, when you talk about one, you're kind of talking about the other at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, Destiny 2 is the game that a bunch of my friends were like, hell yeah, it's Destiny time. Because a couple weeks ago, they had a community stream where they announced the new expansion coming in February, and talked a little bit about some of the new features there. And so a bunch of friends of mine were like, now's the time to get back into Destiny. We have like, 5 months or whatever to get caught up before the new expansion comes out. And the current expansion was on sale during that period too.
Sure.
And at first I was like, fuck this is stupid, let's play anything else. Please buy Hunt Showdown, maybe we could play some Tarkov. Everybody already likes Tarkov in that group. It was like, let's do something other than this. Battlefield's coming in 2 months, please not Destiny. But they kept like hammering the Destiny. At one point I said, I can safely say I will never play Destiny 2 again. Which was then screenshotted and pinned in Discord, because then I finally gave in and installed it and played like a shitload of it last weekend, and made it to the powerful gear grind this week, playing a lot of it. And it's like Destiny, the core gameplay is fun. It's about the best shooter I think out there in terms of
it's Bungie, man.
Yeah, like aiming and pointing the trigger, incredibly good.
Yeah.
And it is still that game, and I do still like aiming and pulling the trigger. Thankfully, this group likes playing Gambit a lot, which I really, really, really like. Gambit, which, if you're not familiar, is you're killing PvE enemies and picking up motes that they drop and then banking them in like a bank in the center while another team does the same thing. Periodically, one player from each team can invade the other side. So there's a little bit of PvP in there. And then once you fill up the bank of motes, there's a boss that spawns, and whichever team kills their boss first wins. And you can kind of fuck with each other too by, when you put in motes in multiples of 5, it drops a blocker on the other side, which is like a taken enemy that will start draining their motes if they don't kill them quickly. It also prevents them from banking motes while it's up. So it's just a really fun mode that is like not as broken as the PvP in Destiny. Because yes, there's enemies can come in and there's a little bit of PvP, but it feels more strategic because they have to 1v3 you basically. But if they do kill you, the consequences are pretty severe, because they can kill you while you're holding a bunch of motes, or when the boss is up, if the other player kills you, it refills the boss health. So it's a fun mode, and my group likes playing it a lot. So if anything, I was drawn in by like, okay, well, if we're just gonna play Gambit, or if at least I can just join to play Gambit, then that's fun. But then I picked up the on sale Beyond Light and the deluxe edition that came with the season stuff. And I'll say they fixed my biggest problem for now. I'm sure they'll break it again, but they fixed my biggest problem with Destiny, which is, for a while there, it was basically like you had to play every week to see little morsels of story content, or you could not do that and then have no fucking idea what's going on with the story. Now they do, each season, it seems like they do a small number of bespoke missions that they keep in the game for a full year. So as long as you check in once a year, which is reasonable in my opinion, you can jump in and play the story content that you missed. It's still no Final Fantasy where you can just play the story from start to finish, which is the right way to do it, but whatever. Also, the story in Destiny is such gibberish at this point that like, I kind of, once I sort of saw the state of where things are, I was like, okay, fucking whatever. I don't know. There's like a giant crystal lady who sucked a dude into it, and
excuse
that
me?
crystal lady is also apparently Savathun, who's like at one point was like a worm, but now she's just a witch. She's got moth wings in the new expansion. I don't know. It's
the wizard, the moon
Yeah,
whatever.
it. If you thought it was bad then, it is like completely off the rails now in a way I almost find appealing. um,
All right.
so I played through Beyond Light, which was the expansion last year. I'm very glad that I bought that on sale because holy shit, I understand why it has mostly negative on Steam. That
Ouch.
expansion is like 3 hours long and it's one new area and there's only like 2 mission areas in that larger area. It looks cool. It's a fun zone to have to do like bounties and random shit in. But the story, if we're going to call it a story, I'm air quoting, is like one of the Kells, which are the fallen like leaders from Forsaken. She's like the pyramids came.
Yeah.
The big black pyramids showed up.
Yeah.
And
sure.
that was how they,
from a high level, sure.
Yeah, I mean, really, it is high level. Narratively, that's how they justified fucking nuking 2/3 of the content of the game last year and removing it and putting it on a server somewhere that you can no longer access, which includes 5 of the 7 raids that were in at the time. And basically took it down to like less content than the base game had when it launched. Anyway, that was also stupid. Anyway, those pyramids are there. One of them landed on Europa, which is a moon and an ice moon. And this fallen Kell figured out how to get this crazy ice power out of it by embracing the darkness. And now she can freeze people. And she's going to make an army.
She believes in a thing called love.
Yes.
She embraced the darkness.
She is going to make an army. Now, believe me, we'll get into that.
Okay.
she made an army. She's going to make an army of ice fallen that are going to kill all the people because they have ice powers and whatever.
So is this like Game of Thrones or whatever?
Dear God, I wish it was as interesting as Game of Thrones, and I don't even like Game of Thrones.
Same.
Instead, no. The whole story is there's one good guy fallen and she rips his arm off at the beginning. And it's sad because he has like 2 mechanical. Fallen have 4 arms. They're aliens.
Oh, okay.
He has like 2 mechanical arms. She rips one of them off. It's very like, man, that was mean. Why'd you do that? He's nice. And essentially the whole story is you got to go kill a couple of her lieutenants to draw her out and then kill her because otherwise she's going to make an army of fallen that have darkness powers. And to do that, you yourself have to embrace the darkness and believe in a thing called love. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, Jesus Christ, the writing in this expansion is like, it's like, okay, couple of things. First, the Exo Stranger comes back. Cool. She's cool. She was in, I guess, spoilers for Beyond Light, the year-old Destiny expansion. If you haven't played it by now, you probably should because you get a really good fucking gun at the end of it if you play Destiny, but the story sucks. Don't worry about it. The Exo Stranger comes back. For some reason, she, the Drifter, and Eris Morn are all on Europa, and they've all decided that they're going to embrace the darkness too. And so the Exo Stranger, who, by the way, is for some reason, she's a robot. She's an Exo. She's got boobs for some reason, which I don't understand.
Sure.
Like, I have nothing against boobs, but... why was this robot designed with like, I don't know. It's weird. Go look up screenshots of the Exo Stranger. Probably don't search it with safe search off because I'm guessing there's some stuff out there. But I think it's
Stranger.
I think
Elizabeth
I think
Bray?
she's who designed the Exo Stranger.
Oh, okay.
It's weird. I don't get it. It's a very horny robot design. I guess if people made her, that's probably what they would make her look like.
Oh my God, this edit has her being very thick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I bet that there's some art out there. Anyway, nothing against the Exo Stranger. She's a really cool character. I just want to I want the person who designed her character model at Bungie with a straight face to tell me in universe why she looks like she does. There's nothing wrong with her design. It's a cool robot. It's like a sexy robot, I guess, but I need to know, was it that like the Brays were really horny for the robots or something? I don't get it. Anyway,
she kind of, for those listening who just don't feel like Googling, to play Apex, she kind of looks like that friggin', oh God, what's his name? Oh, I can't remember. Revenant?
Sure. Yes.
She looks like a lady Revenant.
That's what exos look like in general. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just thought it was funny. They just keep talking about like your ghost. The exo stranger's like, you have to take the darkness within you. You have to start, because there's this whole like light versus dark in Destiny. The traveler is a being of light versus the darkness from these pyramids, and there's this whole lore thing where like the universe is just repeated
So
games.
would you say that you are a warrior of light?
Yes, but certainly not like anything that happens in Final Fantasy.
Okay.
You also have to become a warrior of darkness for this expansion.
Oh.
And there's some wild shit out there. There's some of the lore in Destiny is actually very much like Kingdom Hearts, which kind of owns all things come back to Kingdom Hearts that are good in this world.
Okay.
Anyway, though, the whole time you're like, oh yeah, I'm a warrior of, I've been fighting for the light or whatever, and then you have to, the exo stranger and they're like, you got to take the darkness within you. You got to touch this darkness shard, and you do it, and it's like, oh, sick. Now I can throw a grenade that freezes people. It's not as good as my other grenade, but I can do it now. And like, oh, these powers kind of blow ass, and I'd rather use my solar subclass, but we're here now. I can do ice. And then
that's weird. Sorry.
The whole time your ghost is like having a meltdown and is like, I'm with you no matter what, Guardian, but I don't believe in the darkness. I'm of the traveler's light, and the darkness is bad, and I'm worried about you. And like the non-exo stranger people that you encounter are like, I'm worried about you, Guardian. You're taking on a lot of darkness now. And it's just super corny. And basically the band The Darkness played in my head the whole time. Anytime they were like, this is too much darkness for us to handle. And it's like, motherfucker, I live on Earth in 2021. This is nothing.
That's so interesting.
Nobody eating horse paste here.
Yeah, God. So there's no Herman Cain awards being awarded in this game.
But yeah, I don't know. The story sucks. You get a sick ass, at the end of it, you get a sick ass exotic rifle though that shoots bullets back in time. So when you do enough precision shots, it spawns a little black hole next to you that shoots bullets at things automatically. So I don't know. That part's cool. That's the best part of Beyond Light so far, is that gun is sick. But
that's interesting, because so like talking about how darkness powers are less powerful in general, it's interesting because usually in games when they push you towards the evil side, like thinking about, or quote unquote evil side, in games like, I don't know, Infamous or like a lot of Star Wars games, those are usually the more destructive powers, the more like causing a ton of chaos powers. But for it to be underwhelming here, that's like, oh, that's
what this clearly is from a mechanics perspective, is they're making a new set of powers that are modified differently than the current subclasses in the game. Sure. Like it is when you open up it's called stasis. When you open up the stasis subclass, it is completely different UI wise as to how you adjust it. I haven't actually done, there's post expansion quests to get a bunch of mods you can put on it, and maybe it makes it more cool and better. I haven't gotten into that yet, but it seems like what they want to do is rework all of the subclasses in the game to function the same way mechanically. I don't understand why they broke it out in the menu into your darkness subclass and your light subclasses, especially because they said there are no new darkness subclasses coming with the next expansion. So it's like,
yeah,
what the fuck was the point of this?
Yeah, that's weird to have like a root level distinction.
Yeah, it's going to be at least 2 years before there's another darkness subclass that even makes it worth separating them in the menus. So that design choice is very strange to me. I don't get it. The subclass kind of sucks to use, but I'm hoping that maybe it's more interesting. More importantly, though, than all of that, and the thing that is why I am still playing Destiny, is I finally did one of they have a content called Dungeons now, which I think they introduced before Beyond Light, but I'm not positive. Dungeons are like 3-player raids, kind of. They're much shorter and they're not quite as hard, but the only reason they're not quite as hard is because you only have 3 players to coordinate instead of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And they're extremely hard though from like a gameplay perspective. My couple friends and I, we did the I don't even remember what it's called now. The dungeon that we did, Prophecy, I think is what it's called. And it was fucking wild and very cool. You like fly into the Drifter's weird gambit hole, which is like this like big cracked orb that he drags around with a spaceship. And we went through like some kind of portal, and then we were in this like desert, and the main mechanic for this dungeon was you have to kill taken knights, which are like mid-tier strength enemies. They were very hard because this is like raid level of enemy, general flatline enemy stats. You have to kill them while you're standing in shadows to get them to drop dark motes, and while you're standing in light to get them to drop light motes. And then you use the different colored motes on different platforms to cleanse them. And it was like, it starts with that mechanic. And then it's, okay, well, now you have to fight a boss, and he's immune until you cleanse all the pillars around him. And there is a rotating set of rings, kind of like a gyroscope or something, around the outside that move every now and then. And those are what are casting the shadows. So you're constantly having to readjust where you're killing the enemies from to get the different kinds of motes to drop. Because if you're carrying motes that are light and you pick up darkness motes, you start over. You're like you back to just having whatever darkness motes you picked up. So that was very hard because we had to like manage all this, cleanse all the pillars, do a DPS phase on the boss, and then the pillars would come back. And then the next thing, then you go through this like wild looking, it gets dark. You go through this wild looking big environment where you're using your sparrows to cross the sand and cleanse these different checkpoints. And then you go into this cube, and now there's a little like 343 Guilty Spark guy on the different sides of the cube. It could be above you or on one of the 4 sides that are perpendicular to you. And you have to cleanse the platforms using this mote mechanic that will allow you, that are on the side of where the little guy is, because then you're going to get teleported to that side. And now that side's the floor. So you have to chase this little moat around this cube and not fuck it up, because if you fuck it up, you start all over again. And then finally you have to fight this boss, which is just like, you have to do the motes to cleanse a pillar in this triangular pyramid room where he's in. Shades of him are in the 3 corners. And when you cleanse the pillars, you have to fight a mini boss. And then you have to do the DPS phase. You have to run through this crazy hallway with like platforms. You have to chase him while you're DPSing him. And if you don't keep up with him, you die. It was intense
that sounds
and
great.
hard. Yes.
Like,
and it was awesome.
It's people talking about this stuff that makes me slightly interested in Destiny.
Yeah, that was really fucking cool. And it finally felt
awesome.
like, okay, I have people to do this content with now. This is cool. This is like we're going to do a raid on Monday. And I was looking at the guide for it. And like, at first I was like, we shouldn't use a guide. We should just go in and try to figure it out. And my friend was like, please watch the guide. And I watched the guide and I was like, Jesus Christ, this would take us 13 hours to figure out on our own, which is cool. I mean,
it is cool. Yeah.
For our first raid, I think it's probably smart that we're going to know what to do going in, but I totally get the appeal of that content now.
Yeah, like same. Like I haven't played Destiny and I don't think I'm going to. But that stuff sounds really appealing. Like if you ever watch people do like the Savage raids in Final Fantasy, it's very similar, where it's like you see there's 2 camps. There's the people who watch guides and prepare themselves, or there's the groups of statics that get together and are dedicated to learning it themselves. And it'll take them weeks, if not months, to get some of them done, because they're so complicated and there's so many dense mechanics that like it might be really hard to figure it out. Like in Final Fantasy, there's one, I don't think it's a Savage raid, but there's one that requires you to do a bunch of math on the fly, and each individual player has to do different math. So you can't just rely on like, oh, everyone, oh, we have to do like the square root of this and like times that plus this, and then we all end up on this block. No, everyone has to end up on different blocks. It's not like the whole party ends up on one. It's yeah. So you as an individual have to end up on the right block or you die. And it's stuff like that where it's like, that's nuts and really cool.
There's a mechanic in the raid we're doing Monday. So you do a DPS phase, which has its own mechanics. But then in between the DPS phases, you have to go in this room. And there's three, I think. It's only three puzzles. They're just 3x3 grids. And it'll have a picture, and there'll be pieces of the picture missing, 4 pieces of the picture missing. And there's a 3x3 grid of platforms in the middle of the room.
Oh, and I see.
all the players have to line up, 4 of the players with one person kind of shot calling, have to line up so that they're going to jump on the platforms that would fill in the picture.
Oh, that's
However, while you stand on the platforms, you take a shitload of damage. So everyone has to jump at the exact same time. Further complicating it is you cannot jump on the same platform twice. So when you rotate to the next picture, if your platform is one you've already jumped on, you have to immediately say, I have to rotate with someone. I can't jump on this one. And then swap out with somebody and jump on it. And you have to do that 3 times to get back to the DPS phase. And you have to do that whole song and dance potentially like 3 or 4 times.
That's so cool. I love that.
Which is very cool. It can be frustrating in practice, I didn't realize how wild those mechanics got in Destiny, because I assumed that they were grounded in some kind of like narrative justification, but they don't give a fuck. They will do like, you gotta eat the bananas because, actually I only said that because I did the dungeon last night in Final Fantasy with the gorilla guy. Where you have to eat the bananas. Anyway, I think the thing with Final Fantasy, then I get this, it's just a preference thing. It's not a value judgment. My biggest problem with Final Fantasy is I think the combat, for being a hotbar based MMO, is probably the most interesting rotation wise that I've encountered compared to other hotbar based MMOs. But the limited amount of rotational choice for support classes, particularly for tanks, makes me less interested in the very high end raiding content, because there is to an extent, it is sort of clockwork like, in that you need to do you hold aggro and do your rotation. That is completely fine for me when it comes to all of the content, the group content. It's fun in all the other group content and stuff. But I think because between that and the fact that the gear system does not really, I don't find it that engaging in Final Fantasy. It's a little less I'm a little less inclined to do the very, very high end content, because it's not related to the story, which is my primary interest in the game. Whereas with Destiny, there is an extent of like, okay, these mechanics are very cool, and then at the end we might get some crazy ass exotic gun that is gonna like change the way that I play the game. Whereas that piece is kind of missing from Final Fantasy, because it's more of a traditional MMO. It's not to the game's fault necessarily, but for me personally, without the sort of, this is going to completely change how you play your class sort of stuff, it's not as engaging to me. That stuff comes from leveling. Like, there's aspects of that in Final Fantasy, but it's not so much tied to the Savage Extreme high-end raids. Those are just like, okay, you know how to play. Now you have to be very on it with the mechanics and the way that your class plays, and play it at a high level, which isn't quite as exciting to me, but it's like, cool.
You can jump into like the Ultima weapon stuff, but like, if you're talking main story quest, just like natural progression, totally. You'll encounter some stuff in Shadowbringers that might address some of those concerns, but I don't want to talk about them.
I did start a little bit of Shadowbringers too, so I'm in the Crystarium or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That game starts great.
The thing I gotta say about Shadowbringers, pretty disappointed. The sound it plays when you accept quests fucking sucks. The worst one. It's the worst one.
I didn't like
Uh,
it at the start either, but it grows on you in
maybe.
time.
All I know is when I started Stormblood, I was like, man, people are way too hard on this, because the first time I got the da-da-dun, 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 I
Yeah.
was like, fuck yes, let's go do a quest. uh,
Yeah, totally.
and then the
It's
quest
like,
completion sound that it plays, the like da 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 da, as like,
yeah,
fuck yes, I just did a quest.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. The Shadowbringers guitar riffy thing is a little weird, but it after the
the
first like,
completion quest is sound is a little better, and I'm
yeah,
more into that one. So
yeah,
very
it'll grow on you in time. I
clearly
didn't like it at
the
first
most
either.
important piece of any Final Fantasy expansion. The quest now is
I love the way Shadowbringer starts with your merchant buddy, who just they introduce a character and they make him nice and charming, and then they fucking murder him within 5 minutes.
It's not really a spoiler if you haven't played
No,
it. It's like the first 10 minutes of the expansion, but it is
like,
fucked.
Yeah, and they murder him in a brutal way. It's great.
Yes.
Welcome to Shadowbringers. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The visuals are pretty cool too. Although, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I'll have more thoughts on it as I get through it. But
Totally. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on some stuff.
some of the visuals, I was like, this isn't bad, but I was a little surprised that it looked so. It feels like it hasn't aged particularly well, which is weird given that it's the most recent expansion. I don't know. It doesn't really matter that much because that game is not. You don't play it for RTX on cutting edge visuals, but
who knows?
But yeah, anyway, Destiny, it's very interesting. I already started to encounter the same arguments with the people I play with that frustrate me about any game with high level and PvE content, which is, and not heated arguments. I mean, we're all chill, and that's part of why this group is working, is because even when we were wiping in that dungeon, nobody was getting mad at each other. But it was like, oh, I was like, man, I like collecting. Someone was like, don't ever pull exotics from the vending machine, which is how you get them. For the ones that they took the content out for the quests that you would do to get them, now you can get them from a vending machine at the tower. But it costs the rarest currency in the game to get them, which is like, you have to run high level nightfalls, which are really fucking hard, multiple times to get one of them. And it costs 2 for each exotic. And so my friend was like, don't ever pull them from the vending machine. You need the same currency to masterwork your gear, which is more important than collecting exotics. And I was like, that fucking sucks, because a big part of the interest I have in Destiny is trying different exotic weapons. And he was like, you need to get over it. That's not what the game's about. And I was like, that sucks shit. I hate that. That's bad game design. If you're going to make cool guns, let me try them. It sucks that you would lock up all these cool guns behind hours and hours of grinding. And they were like, yeah, but you already have all the guns you're ever going to need to do end game content right now. And I was like, that's not the point. That's not what I want from this game.
Yeah, well, wasn't the whole point of Destiny, like the thing that they sold it on like months and months before, was like, you're going to tell stories about how you got these guns.
Yes, and now you're going to tell stories about how you argued with your clanmates over whether you should spend your ascendant prisms getting cool guns or masterworking your boots, which is like, but whatever. I mean, again, the content's fun. We're having fun. It is like, the thing that they were saying in a non-asshole way was like, you really should just get over the desire to collect everything. And if you're like me and you like to collect everything, Destiny is a nightmare. Also, it maybe will help you get over it and go, you know what? Collecting stuff is stupid. Video games are stupid. I'm just going to play Destiny and grind with my friends. Somebody said yesterday, can you, in a different group that I was playing with, said, can you imagine a world without video games? And all of us unanimously were like, it would be so much better.
That's beautiful.
Mostly joking, but
yeah, but it's funny. Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. For me, as a non-Destiny player, and just hearing you talk about it, it sounds like Destiny as a individual game, as a thing, has the widest gulf between bad and good in a single game that you can find.
I would agree with that.
The top level good stuff is amazing, and the worst stuff is just terrible. Like, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, there's just so many bad decisions in that game, in my opinion, from a design perspective, and there's so much of a like identity crisis. Because you're right, they do talk about like, well, this is a game where you're going to tell the story of your guardian and your weapons that you've built a bond with and worked towards over time, and then also like, your weapon is everyone's using the same 4 guns and we can't deal with that anymore. So we're going to make it so they suck shit now. Goodbye, cool guns. Now use these crappy guns that aren't very interesting instead to forge your next legend. And it's just like, dude, come on. What do you want us? Do you want the game to be fun or do you want the game to be a content treadmill? Pick one. And that's a little frustrating, but it helps having people to play with because like you get to do the coolest end game content, and it's always fun to jump in and do bungee shooting in like Gambit and stuff for an hour. So that part of it is fun. I would say also this game hates new and returning players. They basically think you're garbage unless you've been playing Destiny all along.
Like consistently.
I bought the expansion, and the next time that I launched it, it threw me into a mission that was 50 power levels higher than what I was at. And it was like impossible to do. And I could have quit out, but I was like, okay, so then how am I going to get back to this mission? I have no idea how I'm going to get back to this mission. I'm sure it's somewhere, but I don't know what it's called. Like, I don't know how I'm going to find it again. And so I just kept slamming my head against it until I brute forced it, and it sucked. And I don't know why it put me in that mission, but it did. And it was not a good experience. And every one of us that got back into it, everyone was like, oh no, the mission they put you back in isn't that bad, because they played the one that leads into Beyond Light. And then everyone bought the expansion. And then the next time they logged in, had to play this mission and was like, what the fuck? This is so stupid. So yeah. Also, like, the new player onboarding mission, since they ripped out the campaign, so you can't play that anymore. The new player onboarding mission is literally the missions from Destiny 1, the first missions from Destiny 1 with different VO. Otherwise, they are the same, because they put the Earth Zone from Destiny 1 back in the game. And it is literally the same levels that you played in the beginning of Destiny 1 with the same narrative like structure and concepts, but with different VO to account for the fact that shit's happened since then, which is
odd.
It's so fucking weird.
That sounds like recycling content rather than being cool. Like,
well, and that's the name of the game, is they're just recycling reams of content. And I have to assume that it was a combination of them going independent, which is great. I'm really glad that they did that. Them going free to play, which is also good, I think. And then COVID hitting, like right around all of those things kind of happening. I mean, and I think it went free to play before COVID, if I recall. It was in like late 2019.
I think so.
But it seems like there's been a lot of like, and this has been the Destiny problem since Destiny 1, right? The pipeline has always had clogs in it that are struggles for them to get around because of the way the game's designed. I will say it seems like Beyond Light forward, the seasonal content after it has been pretty good. So hopefully the new expansion coming out will stay good. They're doing some cool stuff, like weapon crafting is coming into the game. So maybe now you'll be able to craft a gun that's cool. And maybe you'll be able to, like, there's these glaives coming in, which are like spears that can also shoot. So those will maybe be cool. I don't know.
Destiny.
I don't know that I want to sell anybody on it that isn't already playing it, but if you have a group of friends to play, it's a video game. It has crossplay now. That's kind of cool. They finally figured that out and just has full crossplay. One of the people that I'm raiding with is apparently going to try to raid on their phone using xCloud on Monday.
Oh, that sounds fun. That sounds like the ideal experience.
We have a backup for when that inevitably fails, but
worth a shot, sure.
Yeah, they're at a wedding, and so they're not going to be raiding from the wedding, but from the hotel room around the wedding.
Imagine?
I would be raiding on 5G in the reception hall. Discord in the AirPod.
Just when sitting, like, watching the ceremony happening, just one person head down, headphones on, going fuck every now and again.
The Bluetooth dies and they hear everyone screaming. You hear everyone screaming out of the speaker.
Just screaming nonsense.
Anyway, that's Destiny. It's something. I still have a love-hate relationship with it, but
and bad.
Yeah,
It
but I like playing video games with friends. So
it is
what I ultimately
darkness
said
and
was,
light.
I hope everyone appreciates the fact that I value playing games with you more than I care about my distaste for Destiny. And now, I've played the good Destiny content and I want some more. So
Fair enough. If you can't love Destiny at its best, something.
nobody should have to put up with Destiny at its worst, but hey. Anyway, I think that's all of our games.
Yeah,
Um,
only 2.25 hours
yeah, as we've
of games.
talked about, when you have two people,
Go more in
thankfully
depth.
we've both mostly played we've both played at least a little bit of the games we each brought. So I prefer these deeper back and forth discussions about stuff than, the times that I bring iRacing and just stare at the camera and talk for 20 minutes. And people go, wow, that sounds cool.
Wow, so they're cars? Oh.
All right, so hear me out. There's a new Ferrari GT3 car coming to iRacing in September,
Wait,
and they're adding the Porsche Cup car, which may look a lot like a Porsche GT3 car, but it's different, and it's going to have its own series all around Porsche Cup racing. This is a spec series, so everyone's driving the same car, which means the racing should be really tight.
Yep.
It's a little. I want to say it's a little slower than GT3s too, and slightly slower usually makes for better racing. I can pull up the schedule. We can get into the tracks.
Let's dive in deep. No.
So
News.
not a super heavy news week this week. We can get out of the way some of the more interesting relevance or like bigger stories, such as
the biggest story that I'm currently highlighting.
Oh yeah, sure. Oh, actually, I didn't hear about this. This fucking rips. Are you kidding
Dude,
me?
Yeah. I'm so
classic
psyched.
Star Trek games appear to be coming to GOG, including Elite Force and Armada. I'm gonna buy. GOG is gonna get some of my money. Those are some of my favorite games.
Dude, Elite Force is one of the best games of all time.
Yes, Elite Force is really good. Armada is very cool.
It's a really good RTS.
Do they have Starfleet? Do they have Starfleet Academy?
I don't know. The article mentioned a bunch.
They do have Starfleet Academy.
Yeah, that game rips too. Yeah, those are some really good games. I think Bridge Commander is going there too.
Yeah, wow.
That would be if there was. Team?
So I'll say, I'm not an advocate for piracy, but I have maintained a pirated copy of Bridge Commander for a long time because
it's hard to get.
I mean, I bought it once when I was a kid, but I don't have that disc anymore. Bridge Commander is I don't ever list it in my top favorite games of all time, but it certainly is one that I think of extremely fondly. Because wow, is that game cool. It's so unique still too. There's not another game like it out there other than kind of that Star Trek VR game they made, but I don't really care for that.
Right.
And Bridge Commander, one of the things that is so cool about Bridge Commander is the modding community took that game and blew it out of the water. So you can get like Battlestar Galactica mods for it.
Oh, cool.
And
I didn't know that.
Based on the TV show, like the newer TV show, the sci-fi show. And then you can also get like every Star Trek ship that's ever been. And people have modded it out so that you can like get up and walk around the ship and stuff. Like Bridge Commander, if they make a good, easily accessible Bridge Commander that you can then like, it could reignite the modding community. And get and like the biggest struggle with Bridge Commander right now, you can find pirated copies of it, but getting everything to work on a modern operating system and play nice with all the mods and stuff is pretty tough. So if they could put it on GOG, I bet that the modding community would be inclined to put a mod manager or something together to try to make all those pieces fit. That would be very cool.
That sounds awesome.
That's awesome. That is the most exciting story of the week.
I'm glad to have brought this news to your attention then, because like
I'm gonna buy Starfleet Academy today and play it tonight.
Yep. And like Elite Force, we were just saying,
Starfleet Command is in there.
Hell yeah! If we're talking about just top 10 games of all time, personally, definitely Elite Force is in there for me. Like, I didn't play. I played a lot of Quake 3, but I almost preferred Elite Force in a lot of ways purely for the multiplayer. Sure. But then it actually had kind of a rad campaign, which was just like a really long Star Trek episode. And then the expansion let you, like you were saying, you could just walk around Voyager. Like you could walk to all the parts and there was just like fully voice acted stuff with all the original cast. Oh, so good.
Oh my God, they have the Star Trek 25th anniversary game on here now.
Oh, I played that. It's weird and I don't
Oh
like it.
wow. Well, it's weird, but yes, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Man, I wish you could just search all the Star Trek games. Every time I hit search Star Trek, it goes to Star Control Origins for some
Yeah.
reason. Um,
But yeah,
anyway,
there's
that's big news.
anyways,
That's exciting.
it's freaking rad, dude. I love
Yeah,
it.
I highly recommend, and maybe some of these are already on here and I just didn't know, but I highly recommend people go check out a lot of these old Star Trek games. If you have any affinity for sci-fi games, they're so good. And some of them, like
Yeah.
Starfleet Academy, has FMV from the original cast of various Star Trek
yeah.
shows in it. That's really good. Cool games.
Dude.
Anyway, that's
But-
fun news.
It is.
Uh,
I'm actually gonna pick up Elite Force 1 and 2 right now.
yeah, I will get those as well because those are really cool too.
Yeah. Anyways,
less fun news.
oh no.
The
Which one?
I was thinking the Chinese government has put further limits on gaming time for people under 18. This is an interesting news story because it is. I want to choose my words carefully because I don't want to come off like I'm like Chinese government's really good and we should just like all the horrible things that they do, because they do horrific things, including but not limited to genocide and the kidnapping and execution of their own people and all kinds of awful stuff. But it is interesting how this story was initially reported, because it definitely, the headlines made it seem like it's now against the law for kids to play video games on a, say, Monday afternoon, which is not exactly how it works. Basically, when for online games, which includes, it's a wide umbrella, basically any game where you have an account. So Genshin Impact is an online game, even though it's a mostly single player game. You have, when you make your account, if you're under 18, it's flagged as an account for children or minors or whatever.
There is identification verification as a part of the process.
Yep. And those accounts now are going to be restricted to play only from 8 to 9 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays.
Yep.
Which is, but it's interesting because it's not actually like a law. It's not a law that says kids can't play games outside of those hours. It is really just that game developers have to place those restrictions on under 18 accounts. It is actually like explicitly stated in a few news stories I read. It's explicitly stated that kids can play on their parents' accounts if they want to outside of those hours, which kind of makes the whole thing just very weird to me.
Same here. All thoughts, but please continue.
And I think like essentially what it does is it will discourage kids from playing during, like, outside of those times, because plenty of parents are just not going to make their own accounts, or they're not going to like help their kids circumvent this rule. And it's a weird, interesting thing. I mean, I think I'll let you get to your thoughts too, with the preamble that I'm not like saying I'm in favor of a lot of the restrictions and things that the Chinese government places on its people, and certainly not of the like physical harm that they do to their people all the time. I also think we live in a country where we have an epidemic of people eating horse paste. Not we, because Alex, you don't live here, but as someone who lives in a country with an epidemic of people eating horse paste, it's kind of like, I don't know that from that position, I have some kind of moral ability to say like, it's totally wrong that they're restricting the hours kids can play video games, because it's just like, we all got fucking problems, man. And who knows? Like, I don't know. I'm not part of that culture. So I don't know what, like, if in my country, someone, if in my country, they said you have to wear masks all the time, and also it's now illegal to eat horse paste, I would be like, fucking finally, thank you. That's what we need. And it could be that someone in another country would go, wow, they're infringing on people's freedoms to eat horse paste. And it's just like, I don't know, obviously totally different situation. But given that I don't live in that culture, it could be that it is, we've talked about, Alex, people that we know have mostly been like, oh yeah, maybe this will improve kids' grades and stuff. Like, I don't know if I don't want to speak for your friends, but friends that I have who have said, I don't know, it's not that big of a deal. one, it doesn't really matter anyway because you can get around it, and two, maybe it'll improve school performance in some kids. So it's hard to be like
Yeah.
hypercritical of it, I think, when you're not in that culture.
Yeah, and I've had not extensive all the time, but conversations with a bunch of friends who are either originally from China and now live elsewhere, or still living in China, or live in Chinese adjacent countries like Singapore. Um, so my friend in China says no one cares because they're gonna circumvent it.
Yeah.
Especially like she lives in Beijing, and she says, yeah, like kids are just gonna play on their parents' accounts, whatever, it doesn't matter. Um, some friends who previously lived in China and now live around here, North America, have been kind of like wishy-washy, kind of like, like I can see the appeal, but like there's a lot of problems with the Chinese education system that need to be worked out,
For
and
sure.
like the kind of pressures they're putting on kids anyways are ultra
Yeah.
shitty at the moment.
Yep.
So by taking away one of the few things that kids have to look forward to when they get home from the rat race is just like, that's not a great thing for them. Um, and like there's others that say like, yeah, it's probably fine, but like the one universal constant that I saw from all of my friends who talked about it is they wish it was opt-in, like that, like parents ultimately should be the gatekeepers, like they should be the ones kind of with the responsibility to say, hey, like you can play this game at 3 p.m. if you want, but you gotta take care of these other responsibilities first, and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Whereas like just purely saying to parents or to everyone like there's this just global rule that applies to every single person and there's no way around it, that's a little shittier.
Yeah.
And like I think in our group chat we had kind of a conversation of like, how does this affect esports? Because like the international has the Dota 2 tournament has definitely had players who were like 15 and 16 from multiple countries. Prominent one is Sumail. He's now
Mhm.
in Canada, but like there's also definitely been Chinese players who were like 15, 16, and like they're considered major forces in those esports scenes. Like, how does that affect them? Like, obviously they're going to play on an approved account or something like that from their parents or whatever, but like that just goes to show like if the thing can be circumvented, why is it there at all? And like if everybody's just gonna circumvent it anyways, like what I don't know what it's really doing that's positive. Like I'm not gonna say like, oh, it's draconian, it's taking their rights away, rah, rah, rah. Like I'm definitely not gonna go that way because it is a cultural difference. And I'm sure there's a lot of situations where this will actually be a big positive. Um,
Sure.
like especially if it's like gonna curb some like addictive personality type behaviors. Um, that no complaints here. But I think the way they did it was just a little bit too heavy handed.
Yeah. And I saw some arguments that were like, hey, it would be great if we could curb some of the addictive issues here. What if instead of this, the government better regulated companies that make things like gotcha games and microtransaction fed games? But they won't do that because those games make them a fuckload of money, both in China and in the rest of the world, and they want that money coming in.
And frankly, they market it to kids. Like look at Fortnite. That's marketed to kids.
And even like I love Genshin Impact. That game is a huge example of this, where like it is a constant like, hey, spend another $100 here, and you don't have to enjoy it, but these
are Western games, but like,
well, and Genshin was made by a Chinese team. That's why I bring it up. So
it is, yeah. But like, and shortly after this news was announced, the NetEase stock in China went straight down
which is like funny because
it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting problem. It's hard to have extremely comprehensive thoughts on it as someone who's not part of that culture and not living there. Like you said, I'm sure there's probably parents who are like, thank God for this, because my God, I can't seem to get my kid to stop playing games all the time.
Which I think it's much different than when we were kids. Like coming home or like even bringing a little Game Boy with you or a Game Boy Color versus like coming home and playing on the Commodore 64 or whatever, like little PC or NES, SNES, N64. Like I'm going Nintendo side, but whatever, Sega, PlayStation, whatever you pick your poison. Those were not connected to a larger community. Those were not
Yeah.
predatory. Those were not like that was going to Blockbuster and renting a game versus grabbing mommy's credit card and then charging her
And
$2,000.
it's so, even money part of it aside, I mean,
Mhm.
hell, Destiny does this, and there's not even really egregious. I mean, there's just battle passes, whatever. Destiny is
Yeah.
not a gotcha game. Well, it is, but
Yeah,
totally different.
different. Yeah.
Got to get those engrams, but you're not buying those.
Yeah.
Uh, the when I played Final Fantasy IV or whatever on
Mm.
Super Nintendo at my friend's house. Yes, we played that game for hours at a time sometimes, but when it was like, hey, it's time to go get pizza, we were like, sick, save the game, let's go get pizza. And it never felt like we got to finish that game ASAP, because if we don't, in the same way that with a game like Genshin Impact, it's like, oh my God, this event's going for 20 days. And every minute
Yeah.
that I'm not playing, I'm not grinding currency for it. And like,
Yeah.
there is this push with service games to be, regardless of the gotcha nature, the pay systems, there is a push to make it part of your life, to make it, this game isn't a thing you do to have fun. This game is a thing you keep up with and that you are always thinking about and always trying to like push for the next thing in it. And
Final
that's
Fantasy
a lot for
IV
a kid.
Final Fantasy IV ends, whereas
Exactly,
these
yeah.
all encourage you to continually be engaged with them. And yeah,
Maybe Final Fantasy IV ends and we know there's not going to be another game to play that we want for another year or two. So instead, we just fuck around in Final Fantasy IV. We go and do everything. We just like wander around and fight enemies and laugh at the way that the sprites look at times and stuff.
Yep.
Like,
which leads you to speed running, which leads you to that. But like none of these are destructive personality.
No, it was a totally different mode to play video games. They could still kind of be like quote unquote addictive, but it was a very different form of engagement with them than what you get from a lot of current games. And I'm not necessarily saying that I think service games shouldn't exist, but like, I can see how it's rough for kids.
I think they shouldn't be targeted at children because it is basically gambling. And like, which is why I'm not going to take a hardline stance on this China story. I'm not going to say fuck this.
Exactly.
Like, no, it's like
that's my point
there's certain situations where definitely it sucks, and I think it could have been less heavy-handed. But I'm not going to say it's a terrible thing. Like, I think we should be putting a little bit of restriction on our games as it is now, especially for people who are losing like days and days out of their weeks and losing a shit ton of like their income or their parents' income, whatever the case might be, in like potentially self-destructive ways. I think that is a bigger problem.
And when it comes to the I certainly would say the parents, I have virtually no stakes in this, other than wanting to see kids do well no matter where they are, but parents, I know, because parental controls on consoles or whatever, it would never have worked in my house because I would have whined to my mom about it and she would have caped and turned them off. So there is a degree of like the fact that this stuff is mandated, certainly not arguing against parents who want the option to control it themselves. But it can be hard for parents to actually control that stuff and not cave when they're already stressed from a bunch of other things and their kids are being monsters about it, like whipped up into it by these developer studios that want them to keep playing and playing and playing.
Yeah, like in my case, in the household I grew up in, I played Max Payne the day it came out. I was 11. I played like Half-Life shortly after it came out when I was under 10. Like, I watched Starship Troopers when I was like 10 and like Terminator 2 when I was like 8. And that was like, it was fine. I could handle it, but that was at my parents' discretion. It's not like this was before torrents and stuff. You couldn't just go like, oh, I'm going to download this thing and watch it behind their backs. It's like, no, like they were actively engaged with like, okay, we think you're mature. Like you've watched one or two of these and you're not going crazy. So, all right, feel free. And I think like in that sense, like, yeah, I'm glad that my parents had that discretion and were able to kind of look at the thing first and be like, okay, yeah, I think you could handle this. But it gets so much harder now because of just the nature of media and how it's so decentralized and there's so much of it. It's impossible to keep up with literally everything. Like it, it's legitimately impossible. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
It's
tough.
an interesting story. Will be interesting to see how it develops. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Uh,
you hope it's, I don't believe in slippery slopes, but you hope it isn't one. I don't know.
yeah.
Um,
We'll see.
yeah. I will say too, and we don't have to get into this on another 20-minute tangent, but you know, if it is the kind of thing where a lot of high schoolers who are becoming adults soon and are now having their favorite thing to do taken away from them, it's going to create a lot of pissed off young people who will eventually be, you know, again, more than likely, it's not going to mean anything for them, and who cares? But uh, it's not always the best to create a generation of angry kids
Yeah.
from the perspective of your government and the way it governs people. Because when you get a
Probably.
whole lot of angry young people together, sometimes it can cause some difficulties for those holding power.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, exactly.
But
you need
yeah.
a lot more bricks in that wall to fall than just this one for that to
Yeah.
actually mean anything. But
Yeah, that is a it is a larger problem, but I do agree.
uh, also, couple of PlayStation pieces. There's a PlayStation showcase
Yeah.
next Thursday. Who knows what they're going to show? Hopefully, it's something coming out this year.
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
feel like
I feel like
they
they've
could
kind of
have like a something small in them to squeeze out for holiday, and
hot.
that could be cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have grown more and more jaded with Sony and
Yeah.
like
Same here.
their upcoming titles, and I think they handled this year very poorly. Even though I
Same.
thought Returnal and Ratchet were both good games, um, it's kind of, I don't
Yeah.
think they've supported them particularly well, and instead they're like really pushing Ghost of Tsushima again.
Hey,
Um,
the Fox stuff is very cute,
don't
but
get me wrong. I think the work they're doing on that game is really cool too. I'm glad they're
yeah.
given the room to run on it, and I'm probably going to try that director's cut. But I don't
But it's
know.
also
Like,
$30.
yeah, it's weird, and like the way
It's
that
kind of a lot.
kind of canned the Days Gone stuff, and when people really liked that, is like, I don't know. They just don't seem like they are in tune at all with what people want out of PlayStation. And the problem is that they don't have to be, because there's like a million people on the internet who are like, who will swat you if you say anything bad about Sony. So,
Oh yeah, and I think I personally have been saying this for like a year or more, but like I feel like Sony is kind of falling back into their PS3 era,
yeah,
just kind of hubris. And they're not paying attention. They're not listening to anybody around them anymore. Which it was really great with that PS4 event with Mark Cerny and all those people, where it showed like they were listening to their community, they were listening to indie developers, and like they had a total focus shift, and we're like, okay, we get you. And then like they turned everything around. That's where you got like the meme of like Adam Boyes handing was it Kaz? I forget, the used
yeah,
game.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
being
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
this is how it works.
I
Or
think
no, it was
it was Shu.
it was Shuhei. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Yasp. Um,
Uh,
but like that era is gone, and they're
yeah,
back to the PS3 era
it's
of
weird.
kind of sucking
And
shit and being
I
weirdly corporate.
the thing I think that's different is Microsoft capitalized on that during the 360 era by
Yep.
just putting out fucking banger after banger, like just killing
Yep.
it repeatedly over and over again.
Totally.
Like they always had something new coming out, whether it was a third party exclusive or
Yeah.
something.
Like you had Gears, you had the they innovated the Xbox, like the store, the online store,
Yeah,
and they had all those summer sales and like
their whole online service was better. They did Summer of Arcade during that time.
yeah, Summer of Arcade.
They had
that's what I'm thinking of.
they had the Call of Duty thing. So if you wanted to play Call of Duty on a console, well, if you want to play Call of Duty at all, because it wasn't on PC really at that time,
except for 2, but yeah,
it was, but it sucked. They didn't have dedicated server. Like that was a whole thing. And everything after 2, yeah, 2 was good on PC. But this time around, I just feel like Microsoft is also in a weird rut, because they have all these studios, and like it sounds like Psychonauts 2 is extremely good,
Yeah.
from what I've heard from people who like the first one a lot.
Yeah. I want
But
to try it.
also, I want to play it at some point, but I don't feel that like, holy shit, I'm so excited for this Microsoft thing. Outside of Forza Horizon, that one I'm very
Yeah.
excited for. But I also know what to expect with Forza Horizon, and it just doesn't feel like there are any surprises from anything. In all the surprises are ones that I'm looking for from basically indie games on PC at this point.
100%.
And there have been
Yep.
a lot of them, or at least AA, like smaller tier games.
Yeah.
Like I didn't talk about on the cast but I played like some High Fleet, cool surprise. You know, I'm going to play some Black Book at some point. Seems like it's going to be really fucking rad. Loop Hero was a huge hit earlier this year.
It's really the experimental stuff that has always been the most interesting. And it did feel like in the 360 era, Microsoft was more willing to try weird shit.
Do you remember when they had that Wild Ass shooter where you had to you jumped from cover to cover, and it was like you were like upside down and stuff?
Didn't Fifth Cell
it was
make
a Fifth Cell game. Yeah.
Oh, what was that called?
That game ultimately kind of died, but it was
Hybrid?
a cool. Maybe it was a cool concept, and it was a cool like I played that game for like 3 weeks that summer when it was in Summer of Arcade, and was like, man, this is neat. And Game Pass has made for a really great vector for trying a lot of those smaller games out, but it doesn't feel, and it has solidified itself as like, I'll always have Game Pass, but and maybe that's enough for Microsoft, but it doesn't make me go like, I'm not sitting here like, oh man, the next big Microsoft Studios release, because they seem like they're very niche for the most part, each game.
Or a very known quantity.
Yeah, like I want to play Psychonauts at some point, but that is a game made for Psychonauts fans. And like I'm excited to play Horizon, but if you're not into Forza, you're not going to like Horizon. No. And it's interesting just to see both of these kind of monoliths. I'm looking at both of them like, I don't know. I don't care. I mean, that kind of goes into our next story, which is that the Horizon Forbidden West does not, according to the FAQ that's currently available, Horizon Forbidden West does not have a upgrade path from PS4 to PS5. And you have to buy the deluxe edition or higher to get both versions. I don't think this is that big of a deal personally. But I get when they originally were talking about the PS4 version, they did say you'd be able to upgrade, and now you can't. So they're kind of going back on something they said before, according to what's available now, information wise, which would suck. And it would just kind of, it just kind of exists in that they don't really give a shit about the people playing the games perspective.
And it's weird because Sony actually in the Vita era did pretty well by this, of like you buy one copy of the game and you get both versions. And like Microsoft, if you get the Xbox One version, you're typically just getting a license to the game and you can play it on
anywhere
Series X.
Play
play anywhere. Yeah, like that's a good initiative. So it does, this story in particular, and there's been others in the past, but this one in particular does kind of lend into what we were just saying, that it feels like Sony, if they're, I don't know if it's they're out of touch. I don't know if it's they're, again, more corporate and just looking at things in a much more businessy way, but it carries that same notion, that same kind of feel, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the outrage. I also get why Sony does it. I don't have really strong feelings one way or the other on this one, but
I think it's kind
frustrating.
Of blown out of proportion by some of the, Sam wrote an article about it for the site, and I think I don't necessarily agree with like the level of frustration that he and others have expressed over it, but I also appreciate why people are pissed, and certainly like you should still go read the article because it's a well-written article that outlines the issue. But yeah, I don't know, it's a weird, it's just a weird L for them to take when I don't know what revenue is there for them to sell a second copy of Horizon Forbidden West. I mean, I loved Zero Dawn, but these are not games. It's not a service game. Like you're not going to play it for 100 hours on PS4 and then want to rebuy it on PS5. Obviously there are people who will do that, but like it's not that many people. You could have just avoided the bad PR and said we don't need the extra million in revenue or whatever that would have come from people rebuying it, not used, because you could also just buy a used copy on disc anyway if you have the disc-based PS5.
Totally.
I don't know. It's weird, but at the same time, like if you are in the unique situation of really wanting to play Horizon Forbidden West on PS4 Pro or whatever, please, I don't think you're going to want to play that on a non-pro PS4, but we'll see.
Probably.
And you're pretty sure you're going to get a PS5 within the 2 or 3 months that game is going to be sitting on your hard drive. It's only $10 more than the PS5 version of the game to buy the deluxe edition. So it's like,
yeah,
it stinks, but I also don't really see it as that huge of a deal.
And we're also, when did the PS5 come out? Are we like nearing a year out from its release?
It was November, I believe.
Yeah, so we're coming up on a year, and like I feel as though we're at the point where you shouldn't have to expect that, you know, the same game coming out on multiple platforms comes with both.
I would tend to agree.
Like for that first year, sure. That's how it was last gen as well. I think after a year, it's like you're gonna get one or the other, probably. I don't know.
I think the only thing that sucks about it is the fact that they said you were going to get both at one point.
That's true. Walking
so
that back isn't great.
Before I knew that, or before I had been reminded of that, I was kind of like, who cares? Why are people mad about this? But now I do get that it's still, to me, and I wish people would stop doing this. I'm not necessarily picking on Sam specifically here, but it still, to me, seems like people finding something to be mad at Sony about so that they can elevate Microsoft by comparison. And it's like, I get the, like, all it needs is, it's kind of shitty. Like, you don't need to find reasons to shit on either or giant megacorp that makes video games that doesn't give a fuck about you either way. Yep. Like, Phil Spencer's not going to retweet you because you talk shit about Sony. Like, just who cares? Like, be annoyed if it's directly affecting you, but if you already have a PS5, then what difference does it make to you at all?
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of companies that frequently are out of touch, Game Boy and Game Boy Color games are teased to be headed to Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I hope it has the original aspect ratio for some reason, because those are going to look terrible stretched out.
Who knows? It'll also probably be junk. They'll probably give you like games you don't give a shit about. Do you think they're going to have Tetris on there? Doubt it. They're not going to do original Pokemon. No fucking way.
Probably not. Yeah, probably like it's only going to be first party stuff, I'd imagine.
Well, they did some third party stuff, I think, for the Nintendo, the SNES and NES.
Well, I would say, the only guarantees I would say are first party stuff. And then the other third party stuff is more like coin flips.
But what first party stuff are they? They're not going to give you Mario games. Maybe
Mario
one
Land
is like a pity thing. They'll give you Mario Land.
Maybe Wario Land, because those games are good.
Maybe they're good. Yeah. A lot of those games are good, but I just don't. The way they did it with the NES and SNES stuff on Nintendo Switch Online was they put out a bunch of like B-sides because they don't want you to get the good games through the service. They want to sell you those. So
yeah, totally.
If they if they put Red and Blue on there and hooked it up to Pokemon Home, that would be very cool.
That'd be pretty sick. Yeah, if they did something like what's the Kirby's Pinball game? Like, that'd be fun. I'd be cool with that. Like, that's not a high tier, like everybody loves that shit. It's like, oh yeah, if that's there, that'd be awesome. Like Oracle of Ages, was that Game Boy?
Game Boy Color. Yeah, Seasons and Ages. I would love to replay those games.
Those games are good.
I'm one of the few people who likes them.
I like them.
Apparently, most Zelda fans do not, which is, I don't know.
That's fine, because I actually don't like most Zelda games, but I like those ones.
I like most Zelda games, and I like those. Yeah. But I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. There's random stuff they could pull that would probably be fine. But I think if anybody's expecting the hard, heavy hitters to just be there, they're probably going to be. You should probably temper your expectations a little bit. Yep.
Also, in the world of, I don't know. Hey, this would have been made more sense as a segue from our earlier conversations, but PlayerUnknown is departing the PUBG company to form a new studio.
Uh-huh.
Good for him.
Yeah, I mean,
don't
like,
know.
obviously it got huge, but I just find it so weird, especially how they changed the name to like PUBG Battlegrounds officially. Like,
I don't
it's just
know.
so weird. Player Unknowns, Battlegrounds, and now it's not even Player Unknowns. It's just PUBG is its own acronym that doesn't mean anything, I guess.
Yeah,
Like,
it's really strange. And I think I'm always a little skeptical of like, not to pick on him, not to pick on Player Unknown at all. Although I get
mm,
they've been not the sweetest company in the world, not the most wholesome brand in terms of some of the ways they've handled stuff, but whatever. I don't have anything personally against the guy, but it's like, I'm always skeptical when people move into making a game and they make a lot of choices along the way that lead. He made a lot of choices that led to PUBG being what it is now. Obviously, there's a whole team around it and stuff, but when it started out, it was definitely his thing.
and it was a very tiny team at the time.
Yeah, and so now it being this massively popular thing and him wanting to get away from it all to start a new studio is kind of like, well, good luck. I don't wish anything against you, but I hope that if you're making a new thing, maybe don't make some of the same choices.
Yeah, and like,
or do, I
I
guess, and farm that off and make a bunch of money off that too.
yeah, like I think the thing about PUBG was it isn't that it was like intensely innovative. Like obviously he was coming off of doing the mods for like H1Z1 and stuff, and like that's what really propelled it. It was just a more refined and um, I don't even know how to put it, but it was like a better version of the mods and standalone, and it blew up, and that's how we got Fortnite
Mm-hmm.
because they stole it, and that's also the whole friggin' Fortnite stealing Among Us imposters things. But anyways, um, I don't know. It would be really interesting to see if he can do something similar. If he can come up with something innovative that gives us a new shooter genre. But I'm not expecting it. Like,
No,
I think. Again, you should probably temper your expectations.
Yeah.
Like, he, maybe he'll make a total banger and it will change the industry again. Maybe he'll just make something that gets farted out and no one cares about. So we'll see.
Yes, we shall.
Good, good luck to him.
Yeah, definitely. I want more good video games, so I
Yeah.
hope he makes something cool.
And he's made a good one. So
They almost got me. They put Blackpink skins into
oh
PUBG,
yeah,
and I was real close to reinstalling. Then I was like, nope. You know what? This game's not very good now, from what I've heard.
yeah.
So I
It
am
was
not
really
going.
it was really good, but now
It was for a time. I would say again, not that the developers aren't problematic in plenty of their own ways. Although I don't know where that's at these days because the person who said the shitty stuff is gone. I don't know. If you liked early PUBG, you should check out Escape from Tarkov because that game has a lot of early PUBG DNA in it, and I think is more interesting from a mechanical perspective than PUBG.
This is maybe a weird take, but I think PUBG was best when it was bad. Like that's like when it was like kind of janky and like broken in some very specific ways. I think that's actually when it was best because it was like the most fun.
Tarkov recaptures that by not having bad janky gameplay so much. The guns are really good and they work well, but more things like they recently introduced gun jamming. So if you don't clean your guns, then the guns can jam. And a couple of my friends have died because they were trying to get by with guns that they hadn't cleaned because they couldn't find I think you have to find gun oil in the world to clean them. Yeah. And the gun jammed and then they got killed. So yeah, anyway, they recreate some of that oh fuck, this is all fucked up situation there. Our last story is the classic. I was going to make a joke about it being the massively multiplayer, critically acclaimed massively multiplayer online role-playing game.
Well, you know what's happening. Lightning is returning. One could say Lightning returns
to Game Pass
for the first time.
Yes. I think this is interesting just because it's the arc of Final Fantasy 13 is so funny. Like we talk a lot about games that were bad when they came out or were disappointing to people when they came out, like No Man's Sky, and then like regained public opinion.
Yep.
But
Oh, No Man's Sky, by the way, there's a big update coming. Anyways, please continue.
Yeah, it adds like farming or not farming. That was already in it. Settlement building and stuff, which is interesting and a whole weird conversation. But
anyways, Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, it's a game that hasn't changed at all since it first came out. But boy, have people's opinions of it changed over time.
I still think the first 20 hours are bad.
I never made it past the first 10 hours. I think that it's super cool visually. I just think the combat's really fucking boring, in my opinion. Yeah. It's like autopilot. It could just be an auto battler. There's like no strategy, which is, I think, a problem dating back to like Final Fantasy X. Although 12 didn't have this problem. 12 was interesting. You could kind of auto battle it, as the game with the auto battling mechanic actually had more interesting combat, in my opinion, than 10 and 13.
If you wanted it, it was there.
Yeah. But I don't think it's that good from that perspective.
I think 13, I liked 13.2 more than I liked 13.
So that's why I will say I like the characters in 13. I think they're kind of cool.
Sure.
And I like the visuals a lot. The cutscenes are gorgeous. So I've considered maybe trying to take another crack at 13 now that it's on Game Pass, just to see if I can get through the story, because I've heard really good things about 13.2 and Lightning Returns, or whatever the third one was.
I think that's Lightning Returns.
The third one I've heard from some people is their favorite Final Fantasy game, but it was such a niche audience for it when it came out, because it was like you had to have played basically 2 whole Final Fantasy 13 games to really have any reason to play it. So it just didn't have a wide audience, but that among people who were really into 13 and 13.2, that Lightning Returns is like a really, really well made game. It has really cool combat and systems. So yeah, I don't know. Are 13.2 and Lightning Returns on Game Pass? I can't remember.
I didn't see it. I only saw 13.
Yeah, I don't think they are, but maybe they should port those over. I don't know if there's PC versions of those games even.
Coming soon to Game Pass, Final Fantasy 13. I don't see anything.
It's on Steam. Lightning Returns is on Steam. So
okay. Yeah, I don't see anything about 13.2 or Lightning Returns.
Good art. Lightning Returns is a pretty game.
Yeah, we got Final Fantasy 13, Surgeon Simulator, Nuclear Throne is coming later, but nothing about any of the other 13 games. So
yeah. Anyway, that's cool, and I like Final Fantasy, so and Lightning is a very cool character. I'll say that. She's very unique Final Fantasy 13 protagonist.
Yeah, she's great.
Well, without any other bleeding edge news to cover, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Gaming Fix podcast. Civilization 6 is 96% off. So if you
really
want to enjoy some Civ 6, you can currently get it for like nothing.
Is that on
basically free? Yes.
Wow, that's an extremely good deal. Yeah, up to 91% off. That's amazing.
It's
up
like
till
$9.
September 16th. So you got like a week on that one. You should do that. Civilization 6
People
is a really good game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I would argue Civilization 6 is one of the best of the Civ games in a lot of ways. I think it's up there with 4.
Yeah, for sure. And the Platinum Edition is also, I can get the couple of Civ packs I don't have for 76 cents. So
that's ridiculously good.
Yeah.
Yes, you get Civ 5, the
cool.
complete edition for us like $50 or something. That's also really worth it. Civ 5, also excellent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would be much more inclined to point people towards that than Humankind right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining me, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Can people find you on the internet?
That's a good question. I don't know what I'll be doing this weekend. I really want to watch Candyman, but I can't find it streaming anywhere.
Yeah, I want to go see Shang-Chi kind of bad, but I'm 50-50 on it with going to a theater.
Yeah.
I went to a concert last week that was very good, but also if I had known what it was going to be like going in, I would not have gone to it because it was fully
It's a bit
masked,
much.
fully vaccinated. Everybody had to provide proof of vaccination, but it was still a little bit much. So we'll see. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to push my luck. I feel good. I don't think I picked anything nasty up there, but not sure if I want to push my luck at the movies. So I might
Yeah.
wait.
Fair enough. How about that? How about you, Pat? Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me at PJC Plays. I might drive a little bit at Daytona tomorrow. So maybe you could find me if you go down to Daytona, and you shouldn't do that because it's COVID's real bad in Florida, but I'll be driving some virtually, I think. And you can find me grinding my face against Last Wish, apparently, the Destiny 2 raid on Monday. I'll have more thoughts on that, I'm sure.
Sick.
Although I won't be here next week because I will be physically at a race in real life in Portland. So if any of our fans are going to the Grand Prix of Portland, please hit me up.
Yeah. Do it.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for us. As always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at Fix Podcasts, and do all the leave us a review and tell your friends and all that stuff. We really appreciate it, and try to get our listen count directly at 420 this week. I don't know how we can coordinate that, but let's try to make it happen.
Yes, please.
All right, thanks. I'm not going to say Andre's thing because that's Andre's thing, but
But you should do the thing that he says.
You know what he says.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
Be that, I guess. Whatever.
Be that. Stay that.
Stay that, gamers.